Recording in progress.
Good evening. We will call the City Council meeting for Monday, September 19th, 2022 to order. And we will begin with a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the federally recognized Muckleshoot Indian tribe, the ancestral keepers of the land we are gathered on today. We thank them for their immense contributions to our state and local history, culture, economy, and identity as Washingtonians. For public participation, the Auburn City Council meeting will be held in person and virtually. And now, if you will all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. And Sean, will you please call roll?
Deputy Mayor Jayrush.
I'm here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Excused?
Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Malenga.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
All right. And next on the agenda, Council, is announcements and mayor's proclamations. However, since we are beginning tonight's meeting early, the recipients or those who are coming to accept the proclamations will not be here until around 7 p.m. And so we will move on with the remainder of the agenda, and when they come in, we will find the appropriate spot to go back and do the proclamations. And then also the budget review, as you will see as item 5D, will be moved to the end of the business portion of the meeting. So that will be the last thing that we do this evening, is the business portion. And then we will move on. So I don't believe we have any agenda modifications other than those that I just mentioned.
That's true, Your Honor.
All right. We will move to audience participation. This is the place on the agenda where the public is invited to speak to the City Council on any issue. The public can provide comments in person or submit written comments in advance of the scheduled meeting. Participants can submit written comments via mail, fax, or email. All written comments must be received prior to 5 p.m. on the day of the scheduled meeting and must be 350 words or less. Please mail written comments to City of Auburn, attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, 25 West Main Street, Auburn, Washington, 98001. Please fax written comments to attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, at 253-804-3116. And email written comments to publiccomment@auburnwa.gov. If an individual requires an accommodation to allow for remote oral comment because of a difficulty attending a meeting of the governing body, the city requests notice of the need for accommodation by 5 p.m. on the day of the scheduled meeting. Participants can request an accommodation to be able to provide remote oral comment by contacting the city clerk's office in person, by phone at 253-931-3039, or email to publiccomment@auburnwa.gov. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment tonight? Is there anyone in person who would like to provide public comment? All right, I see none. Sean, I don't believe we received any written comments or any requests for remote comment. Is that correct?
No, Your Honor, we did not.
All right. We will move on then. We have no correspondence this evening. We will move to Council Ad Hoc Committee reports. Council Ad Hoc Committee chairs may report on the status of their ad hoc council committee's progress on assigned tasks and may be given their recommendation to the City Council, if any. We currently have one ad hoc committee, that is for finance. Chair Baggett is excused this evening, and Councilmember Baldwin, we will go to you for that report.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I have reviewed the claims vouchers for September 6th and September 19th, totaling, claims vouchers for the 6th for voucher numbers 469224 through 469415 in the amount of $1,699,000, $444.27 with 4 wire transfers, and for the September 19th claim vouchers numbers 469416 through 469582 in the amount of $3,729,247.65 with 3 wire transfers. All questions on those vouchers have been answered by Director Thomas and are recommended for approval.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. Is there a motion? Deputy Mayor J. Raj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I second that, Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor J. Raj.
Thank you, Your Honor. The consent agenda for this evening consists of the minutes of August 15th and September 6th, 2022, regular City Council meeting, August 29th and September 12th, 2022, study session meetings, claims and payroll vouchers as described by Councilmember Baldwin and recommended by the Finance Committee. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda or any items that you would like to be considered separately? All right. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. We have no unfinished business or new business. We will move to ordinances. First is ordinance number 6884, an ordinance relating to the regulation of fences and retaining walls and amending sections 18.04.370, 18.04.372, 18.04.374, 18.31.020, and creating sections 18.04.371, 18.04.373, 18.04.376, and 18.31.025 of the Auburn City Code. Is there a motion to approve? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to move the adoption of ordinance number 6884.
Thank you. Is there a second? Deputy Mayor J. Raj.
I'll second that, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Fence standards have existed in the zoning code since the earliest zoning code was adopted in 1987. The fence standards have not been revised for several years, so it was appropriate to review these provisions for possible revision. The last update to the fence standards occurred in 2012 under Ordinance 6419 and 2013 under Ordinance 6461. The proposed code changes included in this ordinance clarify the fence standards, response to issues of implementation, and harmonize the standards with other code text, and are based on staff's continuing implementation of the fence standards.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? All right, all those in favor of ordinance number 6884, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Ordinance number 6885, an ordinance relating to the elimination of the environmental park zone and business park district by amending chapter 18.36 and sections 18.02.070, 18.23.020, 18.23.030, 18.23.040, 18.23.060, 18.31.100, 18.47.020, 18.50.040, 18.54.080, 18.55.030, 18.57.020, 18.57.030, 18.57.035, 18.64.020, and 3.60.036 of the Auburn City Code. Is there a motion? Councilmember Baldwin.
Sure. I move to approve ordinance number 6885 with the chapters that you had listed for us.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Malinga.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. So this language has been recommended by staff to remove both the EP, the Environmental Park Zone, and the BP, the Business Park District, from Titles 18 and Title 3 within our city code. And so this ultimately is about being able to clean up language around the ordinance and align with the current standards that are out there.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance number 6885, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Resolution number 5676, a resolution amending the City Council Rules of Procedure. Is there a motion? Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I like to move to adopt resolution number 5676.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Baldwin.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resolution 5676 is a resolution to adopt the updated version of the City Council rules, which was proposed by the ad hoc committee, which consisted of Councilmember Baldwin and Councilmember Larry Brown and myself, and reviewed by the full council at the August 29th study session. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding Resolution 5676? All right. All those in favor of resolution number 5676, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Resolution number 5679, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Auburn affirming its support of comprehensive reproductive health care, including abortion and marriage equality, and its support of protections through Washington state and federal legislative action. Is there a motion? Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 5679.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Baldwin.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resolution 5679 is a resolution of the City Council of the Auburn City Council affirming its support of comprehensive reproductive health care and including abortion and marriage equality, and its support of protection through Washington state and federal legislation. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of resolution number 5679, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Resolution number 5682, a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding and related documents to enable the city to receive an allocated share of funds from the Washington distributor settlement. Is there a motion? Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 5682.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Malinga.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resolution 5682 is a resolution in regards to the opioid crisis having a huge impact on the residents of the city of Auburn. There is a proposed settlement on a lawsuit involving several opioid distributors to address in part the opioid epidemic. To receive settlements, the City Council must authorize the mayor to enter into a settlement agreement documents. As a part of the settlement agreement, the city must sign a participation form, an allocation agreement, and memoranda of understanding. The settlement funds must be used to treat and prevent opioid addiction, and city staff will create and monitor the plan to ensure compliance with the settlement. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor, and this is just a comment. I appreciate this this resolution. And, you know, it is so important that we recognize the havoc that has been wreaked upon our communities, and this is very appropriate. And it doesn't pay for all the expenses that have been placed in families and communities, but it is a start. So appreciate you doing this work and the city being involved.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Any other comments or questions? All right. All those in favor of resolution number 5682, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. All right, council, I'm going to hold off on mayor and council member reports until we are completed with the budget. And then I will, depending on the length of our time here this evening, please consider whether you have a mayor or council member report to provide at the end of the meeting tonight. All right, we will move back up to item 5D, which is the 2023-2024 budget review. Jamie Thomas, your wonderful finance director, and her team have been working tirelessly to get this presentation ready, as well as all of the budget work that was accomplished by the directors of each department and their teams. So, council, I know you will provide them your undivided attention as we go through this budgeting process. Jamie? Got it.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Sorry about the slow setup. We are hopefully going to now dig right into the first session of a series of 3 budget workshop sessions to review the biennial budget that the mayor had kind of started with prefacing about how much time the finance staff has put into putting together this preliminary budget, and then probably about 14 to 16 hours of time that the directors and the mayor all spent together going through the baseline budget and the preliminary budget. And after all of that time, we presented, this is what we're presenting tonight. So I hope last week all of you had received your budget books numbers 1 and 2 on your desks. And as I go through the presentation, I'll have directors come up. They'll be presenting their portions of the budget. So specific departments will be presenting their specific department budgets and their associated requests. And while I go through that, I've also referenced the page numbers within the budget books. So if you want to see more detail, I've tried to keep the slides at a higher level summary, but then there's more detail in the book for your reference as we move through. So with that, I'm going to go through really quick the schedule over the next 3 workshops, which is today, tomorrow, and next Tuesday.
Jamie, can you move your microphone a little bit closer as well?
Yes. If I start moving my hands and I bump it, I apologize. The the first thing that we'll go through is a legislative calendar, items that the council will need to consider for adoption in conjunction with the biennial budget. We have a lot of changes this year, so it's not just the budget that we'll be asking council to adopt at the very end, but there's several pieces of, or several ordinances that we also need the council to consider, and I will go through a list of those ordinances as well as the relative timing of the presentation to council and then hopeful eventual adoption. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over the fund review. Just a refresher for some of you, hopefully it might be new information for others, just what governmental accounting looks like. The city has many different funds throughout the city, and they all have very specific and unique purposes. So just going to spend a quick, hopefully quick, high-level overview of what those funds are to help add some context when we're talking about the general fund versus like a proprietary fund. Then I will go into tonight the general fund review, some of our budget goals and considerations, our drivers for expenditures and revenues, and then the 23-24 general fund budget summary at a high level. And then after I've presented kind of that high level budget summary for the general fund, we will start having the department directors introduce their individual departments, their goals, their accomplishments, and looking forward into 2023 and 2024, some of their baseline budget and their requests that they have. On the agenda, I'm hoping we can get through the Community Development Department. We're going to be working from the front to the back in book number 1 tonight, and I'm hoping to get through community development, but we'll see what the evening brings. It is an aggressive agenda tonight. Tomorrow, we will pick up with the 3 remaining funds, general fund departments that we do not get to have an opportunity to cover tonight. And then the second half of tomorrow, we will move into the governmental capital. So those are our one-time and longer-term projects, not ongoing operating costs. And we will look at those funds and those projects in the next biennium. And then we'll wrap up with our final workshop looking at our internal service funds, our proprietary funds, and our fiduciary funds. So that's really going to be our book number 2 that we spend our workshop number 3 on. I mentioned a moment ago all of the different ordinances that we will need council to consider as part of this biennial budget, and this is a list. I organized them in order of when we're planning to bring them to council for consideration. So right now we're starting off with our budget workshops, and then in between the budget workshops on September 26th, we'll be bringing an ordinance to enact a 0.1% sales tax that's related to the Transportation Benefit District. We're normally would be having you consider that as part of the whole package in October and November, but because of timing with the Department of Revenue, they require that ordinance to be enacted prior to October 10th. So this is the time we have to bump it up. We are going to get the presentation piece of the reason behind this 0.1% sales tax presented to you hopefully by tomorrow night. So when we bring that ordinance next week, it'll provide, you'll have the background information hopefully when we do that presentation next week as well. So you'll hear it a couple of times over the next week and the reasons behind that 0.1% sales tax. Then we are going to start on October 10th a series of 1 presentations from an outside presenter for our utility rate review. We are going through every 3 years, we go through a utility rate review for our water, sewer, storm utilities, and the person or the company that's providing the services and doing the rate review will be presenting to council over a series of 3 presentations. They'll be presenting October 10th, October 24th, and on November 14th. There's a lot of information. They want to make sure that they provide a lot of background information, so the council has all the information that they need to make decisions about utility rate increases, potential utility rate increases. And then on October 24th, after we've reviewed this budget workshop and the first round of utility rate reviews, this is the meat of all of the budget legislation that will be coming forward. So it's going to be the budget, the preliminary budget. So we're going to take these 2 budget books and we're going to condense them into a preliminary budget. We will have our capital facilities plan budget, which is embedded in the budget, but it requires a separate ordinance. We will have the property tax levy ordinance, which that we ask council to adopt every year. We will be bringing a 1.5% utility tax increase to the council, which we will also be discussing as part of our 3 workshops. And then we'll be following up with public hearings. We have a total of 3 public hearings throughout this process that we are required by RCW to hold prior to adopting the biennial budget. So you'll see in this calendar those public hearing dates filled in on the calendar. And then on November 21st, if all goes well and the council likes the budget that we have proposed, we will be adopting the biennial budget and all of the remaining ordinances on November 21st. So we're going to be seeing a lot of each other, and we're going to be talking a lot of budget over the next couple of months. Now I'm going to jump into fund review. This is the part that I'm not going to spend too much time because, again, this is more just orienting you. This isn't really related to any of the budget requests that we're making for this biennium. This is just to help kind of set the table, so to help refamiliarize with the different types of funds that the city works with. We have three primary types of funds, and these are all governed by GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and that's the framework in which we operate, as well as GAAP. But we have 3 main types of funds. We have governmental funds, we have proprietary funds, and we have fiduciary funds. The most important fund, arguably, is the general fund, and that is a governmental fund. And so most everything that we do falls in that general fund. That's why I highlighted it. And then I've also identified where we're going to discuss each of these funds over the next 3 workshops. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about the general fund, which is workshops 1 and 2. Then workshop 2, we'll talk about all of the other governmental funds, so special revenue funds, debt service, and capital projects funds. We will spend workshops 3 then talking about the proprietary funds and the fiduciary funds. Quick overview, there's 4 governmental fund types, and that is the general fund being the largest. It is primarily supported by sales tax, so about 75% of our general fund is made up of taxes. So that's sales tax, utility tax, property tax, and now B&O tax. And it supports everything that all of the other funds don't support. So it's all of the mayor, it's you, it's finance, it's HR, legal, public safety, human resources, and all the other items listed there. The next type of governmental fund is a special revenue fund. We have 11 special revenue funds in the city, and the primary purpose of these funds is to account for restricted revenues or revenues that have a restricted purpose. And our special revenue funds include grant funding, the cumulative reserve fund, which is like our savings account, impact mitigation funds, and our street funds. Then we also have capital project funds. We have 3 in the city. They're used for the capital acquisition and construction of major general fund projects. We also transfer quite a bit of money from the special revenue funds, which have restricted uses, into these capital project funds. And most of the time, these capital projects are funded with transfers from mitigation fund, real estate excise tax, state and local grants. The council actually adopts a 6-year capital plan every single year. So in the biennial budget year, you adopt it now as part of the biennial budget process, and in the off year, we re-review the 6-year plan and update it accordingly as new projects either come on, projects come off, or project timelines change. The last governmental fund type is debt service funds. We have 2 debt service funds. This accounts for our LTGO bonds that are tax supported, essentially. We have 3 outstanding debt issues totaling $19 million, and our annual debt service is $1.1 million. The 3 debt issues that we have are still outstanding. We have 2 on the City Hall Annex building across the street, and then a bond that was issued for some golf and cemetery projects, which is almost to maturity. That will mature at the end of 2025. The second major category, the second of the 3 major categories of fund types, is proprietary funds. These both of these enterprise and internal service funds, the main premise behind a proprietary fund is that they're business-like in nature. They are 100% paid for by the fees and the revenues collected in providing those services. Those fees that are collected are used to either pay for the operations of the fund and or capital improvements that are needed to maintain whatever the service is that's being delivered. So as an example, we have 7 enterprise funds, and that's our water, sewer, storm, solid waste, King County Metro, airport, and cemetery funds. Those are all 100% supported by the fees that the city collects in providing those services. Customers are internal and external. So for instance, we have a lot of external customers, but the city is actually also a user of the same system. So that's when I say internal or external, that's what I mean. We also have internal service funds, and the difference between an internal service fund and an enterprise fund is that only the city is the beneficiary of the services of the internal service funds. We have 5 of them: insurance, workers' comp. We're self-funded for workers' compensation. Not every city is, but we are. We self-fund that. Our facilities fund and our innovation technology fund and our equipment replacement and reserve fund as well. We are the internal customers, and these departments will create a budget, or these funds will create a budget, and then based on the relative usage of those funds, those costs are charged back out to the other departments, whether it's the general fund or one of the other 7 enterprise funds. And then last but not least, this is the 3rd major category of fund types, and that's our fiduciary funds. This isn't really our money. This is money that we hold on behalf of others. We still have the same responsibility in making sure this money is we're safekeeping this money and that we're using it within the allowable uses permitted by state law. We have the Fire Pension Fund, which is an agency fund. This is to pay pension payments to our LEF 1 and pre-LEF firefighters. And the primary funding sources are annual fire insurance premium tax that we collect from the state. We also have another agency fund, which is SKIP. I think many of you are aware that we are the custodial agent for the SKIP funds. So we have an interlocal agreement, and we are the holder of the money. So as the administrators, other cities pool their money, we hold it, and then we spend it as we're directed by the SKIP board. And then the last is the Cemetery Endowment Fund. This is what we call a permanent fund, which it's kind of like a scholarship fund. If you're familiar with those at state universities, the principal must be used for a very specific purpose, and that is to be used, in this case, is to support the maintenance of operations of the cemetery. This fund is funded with a portion of sales at the cemetery. So a portion of those sales automatically goes into the Cemetery Endowment Fund. We cannot spend the principal. We can only spend the interest earned on those funds. So in theory, we, in perpetuity, we will always have interest to be able to apply towards the maintenance and operations of the cemetery. All of those funds that I just went over are in these 2 books. In book 1, it's just the general fund, and then all of these other funds that I talked about are in book 2. For presentation purposes, we're not going to go through each fund by their fund type the way I think about the funds. We're going to go through how you would look at the funds, and that's how they're managed. So by department. So by department director, they will present their funds as part of their budget presentations. I think that makes most sense to most people, and for simplicity's sake, that's what we will do over the next 3 days. So now we can get into the meat of our 23-24 budget. Our goals this year, similar to most all of other bienniums, but a little bit different this year, is preserving our service levels, using conservative financial planning. So we're looking not just at the 2 years, not just 23-24, but we're looking beyond. We're looking 6 years beyond to make sure that the decisions that we're making now are fiscally sustainable. And if we do need to right the ship, or if there's anything else that we should be taking into consideration, we're taking those things into consideration now. This year, a little bit different than other years, we would like to take an opportunity to review and refine our reserve fund policies. In our case, our cumulative reserve fund is our biggest reserve fund here in the city, and that I've got some proposals on how we can refine that cumulative reserve fund policy. And then ultimately, the most important thing is at the end of 2024, we have adopted a balanced budget, and that we have not only have we adopted a balanced budget, but we have maintained our minimum reserve balances for both the general fund, the cumulative reserve fund, but all of our other funds, because we do have minimum cash flow fund targets for all of our funds. And just to be fiscally responsible, our goal is to make sure that we are meeting all of those reserve fund balances at the end of 2024. So some considerations that we also had to take into consideration specifically for 23 and 24 is the fact that we're likely looking at some sort of recession as we enter in 2023. So we don't know exactly how long the recession will last or how deep the recession will be, but we know that if one does occur, it will impact in some way, fashion, or another our sales, B&O, and utility taxes. Those are the three. Our taxes in general are highly susceptible to strong economic times and also low economic times. So when there's a recession, it impacts us, our general fund in particular. We still have a pre-existing fiscal imbalance that we're seeing, as we're looking into that 6-year financial plan. We've been seeing this for the last couple of bienniums, and the council has made some very decisive actions over the last couple of years to help right the ship a little bit. So with the implementation of the B&O tax, we've been able to kind of push, I think, what was historically called the fiscal cliff. We're able to keep that at bay a little bit longer, and we still have some decisions to make probably in the next 2 to 4 years, but for now, things are looking pretty strong for 23 and 24. That is still, I say that with the warning that if you trend out our revenues and our expenditures over the next 6 to 8 years, our revenue growth does not keep up with our expenditure growth. And that brings me to the next couple of bullet points down here, which is inflationary costs and CPI rates continue to push the costs of doing services higher. So that's not only for goods and supplies, but that's also for our employees as well. The cost of doing business just continues to increase. Our city insurance rates have increased by $1 million in 2023. This is not unusual for just the city of Auburn, but for other cities, the risk has increased, and therefore our insurance rates have increased. That's a 46% increase over 2022. We have escalating demands for services over the last couple of years. That our needs for transportation, mental health, and homelessness services, as well as a well thought out DEI program within the city, continue to stay on the radar for important things for us to consider. And then last, I think this is always important, but I think in the last year and a half, 2 years, has been increasingly a concern for the city, and that is the recruitment and retention of skilled and diverse workforce. I mentioned a moment ago about that fiscal cliff and that fiscal imbalance. I think this, for a lot of council members that have been here for the last couple of years, you've seen a very similar chart. The good news is that fiscal cliff does continue to get pushed out in the future. Our current biennium is looking strong for now. That's actually stronger than the conversations that we were having 2 years ago when COVID at the end of 2020, we were right in the middle of COVID. There was a lot of uncertainty at that time. So things are looking better for this biennium than they did in the prior biennium. but it does get ugly going out, the forecast. And I mentioned that the outpacing of expenditures over revenues. So on average, we're projecting expenditures to increase about 9% over a 6-year period versus the average increase of revenue of 1.5% over that same period of time. And this is just our baseline budget. This doesn't include adding any new program requests in the budget. So as our reserve fund policies are currently written, our target is to have an 8 to 12% general fund reserve balance, which is $7.9 million to $11.9 million. That reserve is what I like to just kind of call our cash flow. So it's like the amount of money that you always need in your checking account just in between the timing of collecting revenue and when bills are actually paid. So that blue line that you see on that chart is our fund balance line. So even though in 2024, we're right at that fund balance line, that's really the minimum amount of money that we would want to keep just to maintain operations. And that includes a transfer out to cumulative reserve. This will be a part of the conversation with the cumulative reserve fund policy that I will have later this evening as well. In addition to the general fund balance, we have that cumulative reserve fund, and our current target is to fund that at a 5 to 10% level, which is $5 million to $9.9 million. So in addition to that fund balance, that minimum fund balance, we do have a target of $5 to $10 million in addition in our cumulative reserve fund or our savings account. So this is where you can open your book if you have it with you. And I'm going to be now talking through the pages. There's a lot of detail on those pages. I'm going to be talking the high-level summary on page 11. Page 11 is going to be a summary of all of our revenues, both our historical revenues by type as well as our proposed revenues for the 23-24 budget. And I'm going to talk about the most significant revenues here. The first one being property tax. This will be an ordinance that you adopt. It's a levy that we need to have filed with the county by November 30th. We are limited to what they call the 1% increase. For us, this translates to about $240,000 per year. That's what that 1% gets us. And then we also are able to collect the amount on new construction. So this is construction projects that took place in 2022 or new construction that is now taxable as of 2022, but we didn't get to collect that tax in 2022. So we get to collect it in 2023 when it's added into the tax rolls for the first time. So for property tax, we're looking at about a $485,000 increase roughly each year for the 1% and the new construction growth. The second is sales tax. For 2023, we assumed a recession by the time we hit Q2 of 2023, which equates to a $2.4 million decrease from 2022. That seems very significant, but also remember we've had some really strong sales tax showings in 2022, and a lot of that is attributed to inflation. So taking into account that there's likely to be a recession and then maybe even prices level out and or decrease, that's going to impact the amount of sales tax revenue we collect. It sounds like a lot of money, but that's actually the amount that we're budgeting for 2023 is right on par with what we actually collected for 2019. So that's just how much growth we've had since 2019 till now. So even though that $2.4 million decrease seems like a lot, it wasn't very long ago we were relying on that much money annually. In 2024, we are budgeting for a modest recovery, which would be about a $300,000 increase over what we're budgeting in 2023. Utility taxes, we actually are budgeting for an increase on both. So we have our internal utilities, which is our water, sewer, storm, the utilities that we're actually going to be having a rate study. We're having a rate study done on right now, and we're expecting a 2.5% increase. And that's mostly due to our expectation that we'll need to increase rates in those utility funds. So as the base revenue in those funds increase, as the taxable base increases, the tax that we would expect to collect in the general fund would increase. The second piece is our external utilities. So our most significant external utilities is electric, cable, and natural gas. We're budgeting a 1.2 to 1.8% increase. This is based on historical averages, increases in the past, as well as the inflationary costs of energy services. And then again, if the tax base is increasing, that means a higher tax collection for the general fund. The last new significant revenue is the B&O tax. We are maintaining $5.3 million per year in the general fund for B&O tax, really kind of pending more information. For 2022, we are only collecting B&O tax from our 50 to 60 largest businesses that we hand selected for quarterly reporting in 2022. And for quarters 1 and quarters 2, we have collected $1.9 million so far from those businesses. As we get into 2023, we will assign more businesses to quarterly reporting status once we have more revenue information collected through their annual tax returns that they'll be filing at the beginning of 2023. Other notable revenues in the general fund is our permit revenue that's related to development activity. So we are currently experiencing historically high revenues for permitting and economic development. We are expecting, similar to our sales tax, we're projecting a decrease for 2023. The total amount that we're budgeting for is on par with our 2017 and 2018 activity. And then we're hoping for a slight increase then by 2024, which is comparable then to the 2020 activity that we actually realized. Other governmental charges, there's really little variability between our 2022 budget and what we're proposing for 23 and 24. There's only one line item that is, you'll see a pretty significant jump, and that's under the charges for services line. And that is because we have changed our allocation for indirect costs. So our indirect costs, as a refresher, is our human resources, our legal, and our finance, and now our diversity, equity, and inclusion division. Those are all services that benefit the entire city, not just the general fund. So we allocate out the relative share of those indirect costs back out to other funds. And the work that we did this year was to true up and make sure that each of those departments were valuing the costs of services the same, and we used the same allocation method out. So there was more consistency between department and what we're charging out other funds. And the result was a $900,000 increase in that charges for services line in the general fund. I will caveat that means that costs for services in our internal service funds increased. So we've got some increases in the general fund that are now higher as a result. So it's a little bit of moving money from one area and back. The net impact is a positive for the general fund, but when you're looking at it just as a revenue line, it looks like a really large $900,000 increase. The net increase, if you take the increased expenditures into account, is about a $300,000 net positive for the general fund. So I'll get into the expenditure drivers now. All the expenditures are listed on page 12, and we have them split out two different ways, one by department, and then the other is by expenditure type. I've really dedicated this slide to salaries and benefits because salaries and benefits make up 54% of our general fund, and they are our most significant drivers in 23 and 24. The chart is a summary of the total cost increases for 23 compared to 22, and then the total increase in 24 over 23. Total increase in 2023 will be $1.2 million, and a total increase in 2024 is budgeted to be $3 million. For the salary side, the driver is union contracts, step increases, and reclass for positions that have needed to take place over the last biennium, so over 21 and 22. all of our union contracts are good through the end of 2024, with the exception of our Teamsters contract, which is set to expire at the end of this year. So we are currently working towards negotiations on those contracts. So for benefits, our largest drivers are our medical benefits and our pensions. Our 2022 budget looks a little strange. You see that $600,000 decrease. And the reason we see a decrease is it wasn't that costs actually decreased, it was that we had over budgeted in 2022. We had a lot of unfilled positions. I don't know if you recall at the end of 2020, we had frozen a bunch of positions. And when we budget for a frozen position, we assume that we're going to be hiring somebody that has the most expensive benefit package. We want to budget conservatively, so we budget assuming they have the most expensive benefit package. When we're preparing our 2023 budget, we're actually looking at the people we have actually filled those positions with, and in most cases, the benefits aren't that expensive. So that's why you see a decrease. It's just an over budget in 2022. And that said, we are seeing really large increases in 2023 and 2024 for our medical benefits. We're expecting about a 12% increase in medical benefits for 23 and 24. Our pensions, we don't expect to change. We did just have the Department of Retirement Systems just released a small increase for our PERS employees to 10.39%. It wasn't a very large increase. And then currently looking at 23 and 24, there are no projected increases for either LEF or PERS. That doesn't mean there won't be any. Department of Retirement Systems over the last couple of years has thrown a couple of increases at us mid-year that we didn't necessarily know were going to happen. So but this is the information that we have now. So our current general fund condition. These are things that we had to take into consideration when we were putting together our all of our new requests and our baseline budget. We had a really strong 2.5 years in terms of sales growth and economic activity, so anything development and permit related was also very strong. We, at the end of this year, expect to have about a $16.5 million fund balance above what we had originally budgeted. And that's a lot of money, but that is not sustainable. So this is an accumulation of the last 2.5 years, and we can rely on this as like a one-time, like what are we going to do with this one-time money, but we can't rely on that type of revenue for long-term forecasting. So one of the big questions that we tackled with the mayor and the directors was how do we responsibly leverage this money or how do we preserve it for the future? And that's where we came up with enhancing our existing fund balance policy, both for the general fund and for our savings account and the cumulative reserve fund. And after we've looked at enhancing those policies, what do we have left over? And prioritizing those one-time projects and needs. And that's what the department directors will be presenting to you over the next couple of nights. We will be rolling into some of those one-time requests that are relying on these one-time fund balance dollars. And this is a list of those new requests for the general fund. These are all of the new ongoing requests that we'll be asking. There's a summary in book 1, it's on page 87. A summary of all of, and then behind that page, we've got all of the detailed information for all of those new requests. There's a total of 16 new requests with general fund impacts, including 13 new employees. 3 of those employees, though, would be like unbudgeted or unfunded until 2025. And these amounts are net of any revenues or offsetting expenditures. So in some cases, these expenditures come with reductions in other areas. And so these numbers that you see here are the net impact to the general fund. I also have an all other funds column, and you see this on this slide as well as in the budget book. And that's because some of these programs do not live 100% in the general fund, but those costs are shared by other funds, whether it's internal service funds or our utility funds. Those costs are spread across other funds. We'll also, again, each department director, you'll hear from each department director in detail each of these requests. There's also some one-time requests when I'm talking about that $16.5 million and how do we spend that responsibly between a reserve fund policy and actually leveraging that money. We're actually use it so it's working for us. This is the list that we've come up with for one-time uses. There's 13 new requests, and we're proposing to use a combination of excess real estate excise tax as well as cumulative reserve funds for these projects. So now flipping back to pages 11 and 12 again, this is a summary of our proposed revenues and expenditures for 23-24. For the revenue side, that's page 11. The expenditure side is page 12. If you focus on the green highlighted squares, the $98.1 million and the $101.3 million, that's the proposed budget that we are asking council to consider in total for the general fund. So taxes have increased from 2022 into 23 and 24, and that increase is again the utility tax and the property tax and B&O tax increases offsetting our projected decreases in sales tax. Other revenue, as we talked about before, really there's some revenues that we expect to increase, some that we expect to decrease, but all in all, those other revenues we expect to remain consistently the same over the biennium. And then there's the intra-fund transfers in. You'll notice that there is a big jump in 2024 to $11.7 million. And that is because part of that cumulative reserve fund policy that I'll be asking you to consider later will rely on a portion of our cumulative reserve funds to help us balance our 2024 budget. You see the transfer out under the 2022 estimated actual. There's also, it looks like a big increase in our total expenditures to $109.2 million. It's the other blue highlight on there. And that's because we'll be asking council to allow us to transfer that excess $16.5 million out of the general fund into the cumulative reserve fund to use into 23 and 24. It's a lot of moving pieces there. So to look at those expenditures in a graph, I prepared a couple of different graphs for you. This is how that $98.1 million in 2023 and that $101 million in 2024 are divided up across all of our general fund departments. I do want to point out, because it's not always very clear, we've got the Public Works sliver of 5%. That is the engineering portion of Public Works. Then there's 5% for streets. That is the maintenance and operation portion of the Public Works Department. So both of those, Public Works and streets, live all within one department, but they're split up because they do two pretty different things. Another way to look at this, our expenditures, is by type. Again, you can see that the biggest chunks are our salaries, wages, and benefits. That makes up 54% of the whole pie. The next, followed by services and professional services and charges for service, is 27%. And then the inter-funds payments for service at 13% are all the payments that we make to our internal service funds. So our IT department, our equipment replacement and repair, multimedia, and facilities. So before I jump into the department budget presentations, I would like to open it up to any questions that you have just about the framework that I've put together before we go into the details.
Council, any questions?
Okay.
All that work has paid off, Jamie.
All right. So I think we have Dana and Brenda. Did you guys want to come up here? I'll drive for you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Good to see you all again. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, better? All right. So I am going to be presenting, apologies, the mayor and council budget first, and then I will talk about the administration budget. But the most exciting one is the mayor and council budget, so we're going to start there. Reminder that this budget is a general fund budget, and it reflects the budget related directly to you all and the mayor, and those things that come directly out of the mayor's budget specifically. And this is on page, where are we, 13?
Excuse me, there we go. Our monitors were off.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you.
Okay,
They're all back on now.
okay. So if you look at page 13, the org chart gives just a nice visual here of what we're talking about. You see that we put the citizens at the top here as far as our work goes as public servants. And then we have the city council and the mayor specifically, and you can see those 6 different branches coming off of that org chart. So that's what I'm just going to talk about a little bit today when it comes to that. And if you want to jump to page 15 is a little bit more detail about the mayor-council budget, the goals and objectives and accomplishments from the previous biennium, just as a point of review. And if you look at the accomplishments and objectives from the last biennium, 2021 and 22, those were, a lot of those goals were focused on addressing homelessness, our equity work, affordable housing, our partnerships, and also the Auburn Junior City Council. And as we look back on what we accomplished from that biennium, the things that stood out would be that we directly addressed homelessness. We did that by hiring staff, by funding, by providing resources, and continuing to meet the growing need to address homelessness in our city. And we were also instrumental in the creation of 2 major housing initiatives as it relates to affordable housing. It's pretty impressive with the South King Housing and Homeless Partners in King County and the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners in Pierce County. And we did continue to grow our efforts around equity, more on that later, a lot more actually. And the goals going into the next biennium are really kind of continued expansion of what we have done in those major areas around homelessness, equity, affordable housing, and strengthening our partnerships around the regions to reach those goals. And there is one new request, which you're going to hear about in a minute. And so Brenda and I decided to kind of tag team this because I'm going to go over just a little bit of the history of how we got here, and then Brenda is going to tackle the budget request and the goals that she has for our equity initiative going forward. So many of you remember, several of you were on the council in 2019 when we did pass that very important initiative, the Inclusive Auburn Initiative, resolution number 5427, and that also came with a funding ask, and we very much appreciate that the council not only did the words, but they also did the action of funding the work that we were embarking upon. Some of those initial funds allowed us to contract with Racing to Equity consulting firm, and that really kind of started our organizational training. And you'll often hear the mayor talk about how we needed to start with the core, start with the inside first before we can bring that work out to our community. And that money also provided implicit bias training for the Auburn police officers in conjunction with King County Sheriff's Department. and we implemented a human resources annual report for diversity hiring practices. There are several more in there, but those are kind of the major highlights as we took our first steps into this work. And then the following year, 2020, that great year that we all remember, and even so, we had a global pandemic hit us. We still continued the work, and part of that work entailed doing some internal surveys, more internal work with our staff. We did a virtual keynote with Aaron Jones, who many of you are familiar with. We completed the city council training as part of that, conducted a community survey, and also were applied for and were approved to join the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, and completed the city's organizational assessment and report out. And one of the major funding efforts we did in 2020 is we went ahead and staffed the effort and created a program with Brenda here as the DEI manager, and there was a whole lot of other things in there as well that we did. And so, and then from there, as Brenda came on, we were able to contract with DeMarsh. We've done a lot more customized work with our departments, and doing a bit more community outreach, and actually applying our DEI lens to a lot of the work that we're doing in the city now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brenda to talk about the future of the work. But wait, I forgot to mention the most exciting thing is that Mayor Backus, as announced to you, did create an Office of Equity here in the city of Auburn, and named Brenda to our Chief Equity Officer to lead that effort, and it's yours.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Brenda Goodsamore, and I'm the city's Chief Equity Officer. So I'm here tonight to present my budget proposal for the Inclusive Auburn initiative, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about the overall goals and mission statement for the Office of Equity. So the City of Auburn is committed to and accountable for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in all of its forms. We embrace individual identities, foster a culture of inclusion that supports both broad and specific diversity goals and objectives, leverage the benefits of diversity, and engage all individuals to help them thrive. We value inclusion as a core strength and an essential element of our service to this community. Our overall goals for 23-24 and ongoing are that we foster and maintain a safe environment of respect and inclusion for all residents, employees, and visitors to our community, that we educate our employees and residents and visitors to be anti-racist advocates, creatively providing training, programming, and environments that reflect the diversity of our community and elevate cultural awareness and understanding. We ensure fair and inclusive access to our facilities, programs, resources, and services, and ensure that all of our policies and practices are inclusive and equitable, and that we advance and build our workforce by assessing hiring practices and performance review procedures to attract, retain, and develop talented employees and staff who reflect our community. In order to achieve these goals, the city is currently following a framework that's set forth by the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. This model emphasizes 3 stages in racial equity organizational development, and those are normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing. So stage 1, normalizing, is creating a shared analysis and definitions, and doing so by prioritizing racial equity. This includes the implementation of the Inclusive Auburn Initiative and ensuring that it becomes a collective and shared responsibility by each leader and staff member in our city. To achieve this, we provided 48 hours of adaptive leadership and professional development for the City Council, Mayor, and directors. We are currently providing professional development for managers and staff, informed by recommendations made in the city's organizational assessment, which were based on the findings from data collection and analysis performed in 2020, as Dana mentioned, by Racing to Equity. Stage 2, which is organizing, is building organizational capacity through a targeted commitment to the breadth and depth of institutional transformation. This is the phase we are currently entering as we continue progressing through the end of stage 1. We continue to build organizational capacity through training, policy work, and community engagement. We work in partnership with other cities and government agencies. We are a member of GREI, which is the Government for Racial Equity and Inclusion. It's a regional group of cities formed to promote racial equity development in Renton, Tukwila, Federal Way, Linwood, Bellevue, Shoreline, Kirkland, Bothell, Sammamish, Kent, Berrien, as well as King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Spokane counties. Stage 3 is operationalizing. We will be implementing racial equity tools and being data-driven. We will create a strategic plan. We will implement racial equity tools. We will build strategic community relationships where we share power and decision-making and spark meaningful participation by listening to the community's needs, interests, and voices, which will determine our policy and program priorities. We will be data-driven to set metrics and goals to measure our progress. Dana already mentioned the history of our DEI initiative as we've progressed over the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're currently doing. We recently completed foundational training for human resources, the mayor's office, administration, IT, legal, and the planning department. And it's ongoing through the rest of the year where we will continue to work with the rest of the departments. We continue to build and develop our racial equity framework, and this is how we get to where we want to go. We are in draft form of our citywide roadmap, and the map from assessment to operationalizing. As we move forward in our anti-racist equity and inclusion work at the city, please understand where a city invests its resources is a powerful indicator of its values. An organization's responsibility to anti-racism and a broader DEI strategy must come with appropriate budget resources and staff to advance the work. And while we have made progress over the last 2.5 years, we have much more work to do. So I'm here to request 2 new decision packages. One for an ongoing and sustainable budget, shown here as a $236,000 budget request, which is ongoing, and for a DEI staff position of $147,000 in 2023 and $154,000 in 2024. The budget for the DEI program will fund goals and objectives for 2023 and 2024, such as employee resource group development, initial facilitation and training, a train the trainer curriculum professional developed for our inclusive Auburn advisory team, an employee advisory group professional development training, operationalizing equity at the department level, and that will consist of training and policy review, paying for speakers to come in and talk to the entire city staff, equity and inclusion citywide and departmental workshops, city leadership professional development, citywide policy development review and changes, completion of our City of Auburn racial equity policy and equity tool development, research analysis and metric development, training for our racial equity toolkit, developing an external community advisory group, training and facilitation of that group. And I just wanted to mention a little bit about why funding for staff development and training, which a lot of this budget request covers, is important. And the purpose of anti-racism education, training, and employee development will assist municipal governments and enact our mission to authentically achieve inclusive excellence and anti-racism. Moving from non-racist to anti-racism is a process and requires intentionality to address both interpersonal acts of racism and structural or institutionalized racism in policies, practices, also known as systemic racism. It is essential to progress from diversity awareness, celebrating various cultures, and cultural competence, which is effectively operating in multiple cultural contexts, to anti-racism and racial equity, where we are dismantling systemic racism.
And-
Any questions?
Council, those two program improvements are on page 113 and 114 of the small binder, in case you didn't see that. Okay. Are there any questions regarding the mayor and council budget? Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say, man, that's pretty incredible what you're doing. Thank you so much. Congratulations on having us be part of GARE. That's I think the world of them. And thank you to the mayor for helping lead this. This is really, really impressive. So I just wanted to express my thanks to you, and God bless and Godspeed.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, I'd like to, reiterate what Councilmember Stearns said. This is really great work. And, they say that a budget is a moral document and really describes what it is that we stand for. And I'm glad we're standing here to make progress. I do have a question. They say that we're more likely to accomplish what we measure. And I'm curious, do you have metrics that you're anticipating for us to use to help us understand whether, our expenditures here are allowing us to reach goals that we are trying to accomplish?
Yes, part of the request, the budget will be spent on data and metrics. However, right now we are still in that normalizing mode, and so we're working on training, and that's part of developing the framework, is identifying where we want to measure and how we measure our progress. So that will be ongoing and determined by more than just me. And so as we progress through identifying what those metrics are going to be, then we will report that out. I will be reporting that out to you.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm excited to see the changes coming in this arena. One question I have as far as coverage of the program might fall to our HR department, which is I'm curious from the standpoint of for having diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know a lot of major corporations go through the process of looking at pay scale, salary, and making sure that people are not underpaid. I think it's well known nationally that people of color tend to be receiving less at the end of the day for the same work that peers might be doing. But I don't see anything represented in our budget that might address whether we've done that internal review to make sure that we're paying people, first and foremost, the same as what others should be making. Given that salary is such a big part of our budget, is that something we've done in recent years? Is that something that may be coming down the road? And I'm curious where that would fit into budget planning.
Yes, we did actually do a pay equity study with the Department of Labor and Industries 2020, I believe it was. But I know that there are some, Human Resources is actually working on some data metrics right now and formulating what they're going to be looking at. So, or what they're going to be reporting on and collecting. So I don't want to speak for the Human Resources Director, but she may have some information to share with you during her presentation.
Sure. Thank
We
you.
can get back to you on that too.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited myself. I remember the first day and the time that this all came up, and it was exciting back then that we were thinking about doing this. So I am so happy and so proud that we have gotten to where we're at right now. You said you're going to be data-driven. Are you getting the data from all the surrounding cities that you mentioned that are going to be part of this? And would we be getting information showing the data as well?
Yeah, initially we'll be looking at data internally about what sort of goals and benchmarks that we're setting and how we're meeting those, and working with Human Resources on our hiring statistics and things like that. the surrounding cities were all kind of starting from the same place. So they're actually building their metrics as well. And that's why we get together as part of that GREI group that I mentioned, is to just share information about what we're working on and where we are with it. So, and then as we progress, we are taking ideas and examples from each other and implementing those within our organizations. So there will be external data to look at once we turn our focus on the community, out to the community, and but initially it will be internal data that we're looking at.
All right, thank you. Again, I'm so excited, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, as everyone has shared, I'm also excited about this new office that's been formed. And congratulations, Brenda. As I look at the cost, the $236,000 and the $280, this is ongoing. How much is that, the training portion? And then as everyone is trained, is those numbers going to go down, or will they stay at those high numbers?
So the predominant amount of the budget is in some form of training. There are different places that we're offering training. So right now we're completing the foundational training with staff, and then we'll be moving into more concentrated training for leadership, for our internal advisory group that we're our team, and then some leadership development. So it's going to look different in different areas, but just ongoing development, and it does take quite a bit of training to get us where we need to be.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments, council? All right.
I will just add one more thing. Right now, this is being reflected in the mayor-council budget. At the beginning of next year, we will move that into its own budget line item, because the goal here is to have a program that's sustainable, regardless of who the mayor might be, let's say. And so the end game is to create a sense of permanence and sustainability with the program. So you will see next year that will move into its own budget line item.
All right. Brenda, Dana, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dana doesn't get to go anymore.
I don't get to go. I'm going to hang out for a little bit longer. If you want to go to page 19, this should not take very long at all. I do not have any new request in my my administration budget, but you can flip there just for fun on page 19. You can see the org chart there. Overall, there are 3 divisions within administration. That is emergency management, communications, and facilities. 2 of those, emergency management and communications, have a general fund impact. And there is an uptick in expenditures there, all related to salaries, benefits, and interfund charges. And overall, just real quickly, in communications, I would say our major accomplishments were that we just continue to leverage modern communication channels, as well as maintaining traditional outreach. And we have continued to expand our outreach into to reach more of our communities. The overall goal, I think, of any communications department is what you'll hear in public information officer training, is to get the right information to the right people at the right time. But I think as we continue to look through our equity lens in all of our work, I would also add in the right way for them. And we have been working with Brenda for quite some time to look at how we communicate, what we communicate, where we put things out, and how we do those things. So 2023 and 24 will just continue to add on to that. And then in emergency management, I would say our major accomplishment in the last biennium is that we survived. You know, COVID put a strain on all emergency managers across the region. And while the division was limited by COVID, and we were able to resume many in-person activities heading into 2022, which we're very excited about. And probably the biggest accomplishment is that we reworked our expenditures working with Jamie's office we do have one part-time position in that division that was grant funded, And our previous emergency manager really wanted to stabilize the program and stabilize the staffing for that. So we moved that into the general fund, and we're able to utilize those grant funds in a different way. You know, the next biennium will just be all about training, getting our staff trained, making sure that we are mission ready, as they say, so that when something may happen, not if, but when, we have our staff ready to respond to our community and continue the outreach in community preparedness too, which is very important. And we have kind of some new initiatives working with HR on employee safety and some other things as well that we're very excited about. So overall, that is my ask for admin, which is not asking for much. Happy to field it.
Questions for Dana for the administrative budget? Councilmember Brown.
Just very quickly, Dana, as you talked about surviving 2020 and 2021, it made me think to myself, what you know, it had been 100 years since we'd had a pandemic, so probably
Yeah.
wasn't top of mind. And maybe sometime in the future, we might get a report on changes that have been made in emergency management
You bet.
related to pandemic and public health.
Okay.
Thank you.
Council, would you like a report like that? Yes? Okay. I just want to make sure we have a quorum of council members that are asking for that before we do that.
For
All right.
sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Baldwin?
Thank you, Mayor. Director Hinman, I noticed one thing in the goals from 2021 to 2022 versus 2023 to 2024. It looks like for the Community Emergency Response team, or the CERT trainings, that we go from a target of 3 classes a year to 2 classes a year. Any reason for the decrease or just cadence?
Well, I'll say 2 things. First of all, our current emergency manager didn't write these. And so I can tell you that we will blow that goal out of the water.
Okay.
Because she is super excited to get back into the community engagement and reestablish those trainings, do refresher trainings for our previous graduates and things like that, so.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I know, I need to make sure other council members have an opportunity before a council member asks the second question. Any other questions? All right. Councilmember Baldwin?
Sure. Thank you. Second question is, in the area of emergency preparedness and having the Emergency Operations Center, so from a planning perspective going forward, I know there are probably more people in the community than ever because of trends we're seeing nationally around active shooter situations. Are we ever going to move in a direction of having the EOC spun up for more of our community events as a standard practice?
So we do stand up in a monitoring level for all of our regular community events like Veterans Day Parade, large-scale events, that type of thing. We do stand up in a monitoring phase. What I just sort of hinted at with working closer with HR on some of those other employee safety issues, that is one thing that we are developing a strong partnership on the risk side as far as how emergency management can play a role in those types of situations, which, as you all know, some of them have been very public, have happened here in our own city. So those will be kind of an expanding effort as well.
Okay, because I'm glad to hear it. I think that's one area where you don't want to wait until after the fact, and so I hate to think that that's something we'll have to think about as far as an investment for the city to be just ready for as it comes. But I think that's one of those areas for risk aversion that as much as we can do is always a great thing.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Quit hogging the seat. It's time for somebody else.
Director Martinson?
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Candace Martinson, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management. So I'm going to go through our 2021 and 2022 accomplishments. Those are on page 27 of your binder. So for 2021, 2022, there are some things listed here. I would say that in addition to the items listed here, a big area for us was the ever-changing COVID protocols that we were working through with our employee groups to ensure that they were safe and that we were following CDC, Department of Health, and King County public health guidelines. So that's something that has taken a lot of our staff's time, but that we didn't necessarily reflect in here since that was, we were in the middle of developing this budget, I think, when COVID hit. So in addition to that, going through the list, so we were able to successfully negotiate collective bargaining agreements with all of our bargaining units from our police department. So that was a successful endeavor during a really challenging and difficult time. So I'd like to thank Chief Collier and all of the union leadership for that, for those bargaining units. We were also able to have a successful benefit renewal where we actually had some benefit savings. And so within the benefits area, we are now seeing the effects of COVID. We've been in discussions with our broker about rates, as Director Thomas was talking about. Those renewals are coming in a lot higher for insurance. So trying to manage through that. In addition to that, we, over in Human Resources and Risk Management, manage the court contract for the city with King County District Court. So in 2021 and 2022, we partnered with Kent Hay, our legal department, and our police department to assist in a successful implementation of community court. And we provide some staff assistance and resources with our HR assistant for public defense screening, as well as work crew and the scheduling and sign up for that, and then some in-person support for the resource center that we have on Thursdays that we run that's co-located with the community court. In addition to that, we have been working off of some one-time funds for a city's training and development budget. And so one of the asks that we'll be going through tonight with council is for that to be part of our ongoing baseline budget instead of the one-time ask to piecemeal that program together. We were able to successfully bring back our spring management retreat where we went over some of those diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices that we've worked alongside Brenda Goodson-Moore to implement in human resources. In addition, there's been a lot of changes in our process that our department directors have had to partner with us. So we appreciate it was a unified front and a partnership to try and implement some best practices related to hiring, onboarding, and retaining staff. In addition, it's been on the recruitment front, which isn't necessarily called out here, but as any of you that have been watching the news have heard, it's been a very challenging labor market. So us partnering with all of our departments to try and bring in and retain qualified staff has definitely been challenging. So some of our asks are related to us being able to keep pace with that, implement best practices, and modernize our onboarding processes and our interaction with our finance department, specifically payroll for changes that are required and implementing more of a self-service model for our staff members. But one thing that I'm very excited about is that we've implemented some diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices. So we implemented blind screening in 2019, which we saw that's basically where you redact any personally identifiable information from an application. We saw a lot of success with that. We've also done training with all of our interview panels on bias and how to acknowledge and address bias. We've also implemented scoring matrices for all of our interviews. So instead of those being subjective gut feelings, they're actually scored and evaluated and ranked based on how someone participated in that interview, scored on those questions. And so that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion has resulted in 43% of new hires in 2021 being representative of diverse populations. So the city's leadership team and all of our hiring managers has done a tremendous job in really making a lot of positive strides and changes in this area. So something that should be celebrated. And the city's current census for 2021, when we looked at this metric, was a 46% diversity rate. So we were about 3% behind that. And I know that you were talking with Brenda a lot about metrics. And so something that we were really excited to do is we found through some professional colleagues a group called AP3 Analytics that actually did this work with Pierce County. And so we have some preliminary dashboards that we did that we've presented to all of the directors to talk about the diversity initiatives in their specific departments. So now we can set some goals internally of how we can increase diversity in targeted areas. And what we found is I think typically working in HR for a long time, I've heard prior to the movement of diversity, equity, and inclusion being something that's very proactive that organizations are doing, that there was always the question of where do we find diverse candidates and how do we get them to apply for government. And what we found with being able to look at our applicant tracking software is called NeoGov. And what we were able to see with these great data mines working with our IT staff is that we were able to pull out that we actually have a applicant pool that reflects the diversity of our community, that we're losing them along our process somehow. And so how can we target intentionally on to not lose diverse candidates throughout our process? So more to come on that area. And then looking at our goals for 2023 and 2024, we'll continue to manage the compensation and benefit program for the city. As you're all aware, CPI is record highs right now, and so it's provided some challenges for us. So we're trying to make the appropriate decisions in conjunction with the mayor, the department directors, and the finance director specifically to try and retain the staff and pay them a fair wage. As Brenda was sharing with you, we did go through a voluntary pay equity audit in line with the legislation that was just recently passed, the Equal Pay Act. And so there is a draft policy that is forthcoming that is currently being reviewed right now. But we went through a voluntary audit and we passed the audit with some recommendations on training. But they reviewed all of our pay, our processes on how we bring staff in, our processes on how we promote folks. So we were pretty happy and proud that we got a successful, encouraging rating in that regard. And then we are looking forward to working with the mayor and our legal department and our police department on a municipal court study. So we're negotiating the final contract, but we have selected an organization to help us through that. And I've also been working with Brenda Goodson Moore, and we'll be applying Government Alliance for Racial Equity, their DEI lens that they have. That was part of our contract. So that'll be information that'll be forthcoming for the council and presentations. And then in addition to that, looking for budget support to continue our training and development program, and looking for also some enhancements to be able to modernize our HR processes. So I can jump to our first request, which is on page 106, HRR 003, which is transitioning our limited term human resources coordinator to a full-time equivalent employee. So when we were having and experiencing a record number of turnover due to the current climate for labor, that we hired a limited term coordinator to help us, be able to handle the ongoing recruitment needs for the city. So currently, without this position, if it was not renewed, we would have 139 positions assigned to our civil service examiner that's doing all of our police hiring. And for those of you that aren't familiar, that's a pretty lengthy process and an extremely competitive process in this climate, in this state. So she is more than busy handling all of that recruitment and those needs. And it is a very competitive process, a very quick-moving process. In addition to that, we have a human resources coordinator who is then handling 329 FTE positions, which is just not a sustainable workload. So this recruiter would be handling the 98 Teamster positions and specifically would be focusing on implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring best practices for all of those positions. We've begun some of that work now in partnership with Public Works, with Director Galb, and also her management staff at Maintenance and Operations. We'd like to continue that work. They're very excited about it. In addition to that, we have around 200 temporary, seasonal, and volunteer positions that this position is assisting with, and all of our parks programs are very dependent, as well as all of our maintenance and operations. Seasonal work is very dependent on that program, and for those non-benefited hourly positions, it's very difficult to fill those, as you probably see when you're driving around looking at fast food or those types of what they're offering from hourly rate to try and get staff. It's a very challenging labor market as well. And so if this position is not transferred over to full-time equivalent, we would just be delaying a lot of our hiring practices, which implements our ability as a city to provide service to the public. Are there any questions on anything related to that ask?
Questions, Council? Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you. Thank you.
Your microphone, please. There we go.
All right, there we go. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor, and so thanks, Director Martinson. Hey, I was going to ask you about the hiring process and using the DEI approach. Do we, excuse my ignorance, but do we have like a ban the box policy, so where you don't get to the conviction question or arrest question until you've gone pretty far down the application process?
Correct. So we extend a conditional job offer before we inquire anything on a background, and we have been working with our departments to identify disqualifying criteria. But I think there's been a movement in government in modifying some of the disqualifying criteria by applying a DEI lens.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Great report. I was looking at the chart in 28 on your L&I claims. Do you have incentives in departments on, the reason why I'm saying this because I was in a grocery store and there was a lot of accidents in the meat department. That's where I worked at. So they gave us all an incentive that each department, whoever could keep the L&Is in accidents, we had to make sure we all did the proper lifting and the proper this and that to keep our L&I claims down. And it really helped out because we were more conscious on what we were doing and making sure that we weren't costing the company a lot of money on the L&I claims. So do you guys have anything like that?
We don't currently have a safety incentive for that. However, that being said, definitely open to any suggestions. I think we have pretty much a safety expert that we've been able to hire. She is coming to us from a background of L&I. She also worked at Green River College and has a lot of safety certifications. And so She started with us a few weeks ago, and she's going to be going around meeting with each department. Kind of, that's a good jumping off point to what Councilmember Baldwin was asking about employee safety. And I know that Director Hinman had mentioned a little bit of the work that we're doing in partnership with emergency management. As you're aware, you've probably heard of some incidents that have happened at city facilities. And so there was a request, well, there's been an ongoing request, honestly, which is kind of related to some of our training and development asks, is to have de-escalation training provided on an annual basis for our staff. So we did provide de-escalation training in this last year, and the feedback from that training was that the city has some work to do as far as ongoing onboarding and training of safety best practices. And so we're working with departments and kind of spreading it out. So we worked with our Parks Department, and currently we are meeting with a group. It's called Tactical Training Academy, and they provided the de-escalation training, and they're actually providing procedures for us, for our facilities, for our employees to train to. So we're kind of hoping more of a focus on safety, that we're going to see that there's going to be obviously a reduction in claims, which we would love to see, but also that there is more of a safety awareness or safety culture in the organization. So I think we've done a great job. I think there's a lot of areas that we can continue to improve.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I appreciate Council Member Trout-Manuel's question inquiry. In a previous life, I was the safety coordinator for the machinists at Boeing, so I have a lot of experience with that. And there has been a lot of debate over the years about rewarding safe behavior. And one has to be very careful about it, particularly if you're having rewards for a cumulative or work group wide reward for clean safety reports. What you sometimes can find, if you're not careful about how you do these things, is that you have crew members putting pressure on individuals who may get hurt at work and trying to get them to not report their injuries. And so I just would caution that it is, labor has worked for a long time to try to eliminate those sorts of rewards and, as you say, talk about safety culture, which is more difficult, but in the long run, it's more rewarding because you're going to change how people work. So I just would, and compliments to my colleague here for bringing the idea up, but you have to be careful about it.
No, thank you for that comment. And we have done a safety incentive for people that have referred, I guess, safe work practices or safety ideas or things, more of like a proactive thing that the safety committee has done. And already our new staff member has sat through the first safety committee and is really excited on how she can tie safety into other wellness events and to make it more of a positive culture rather than a punitive culture. So, yeah.
Deputy Mayor Jayraj, and then Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Martinson, thank you very much for this evening's presentation. My question has to do with the insurance rates going up. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And then I've got a follow-up question.
Of course. So we have the ability, because we purchase our own plan through a broker, we have our ability to negotiate. And typically, we're able to negotiate down from a proposed rate. And so what we're finding in this negotiation, in speaking with our broker, is that our insurance provider is saying that, so to be in a network, Multicare, for example, would agree to an amount that they would be reimbursed for services by our insurance provider. And because the costs of those services are going up because of staffing shortages and all kinds of issues being incurred at hospitals, staffing, potentially even like equipment shortages, those types of things. Also inflation for the costs of their staff and other things that we're seeing here as well. That what my perception is that they're turning that cost over to Primera, who is then turning it over to the city. And so where we struggle with that is within those embedded costs, there's some fixed costs, but then there's also some costs that are negotiable. And I know insurance isn't in the business to lose money by covering us, but we're trying to negotiate what is the actual impacts of our members and their dependents and our claims. So I guess that's kind of the difference of philosophy between us as a consumer and them as the provider, but also wanting to make a certain amount of revenue and also cover and offset their costs. I hope that answered your
Yeah,
question.
that answers the question. My follow-up question is does that have to do with anything as far as our claims as a city? Has it gone up from previous years?
So there has been just COVID claims that have impacted it, and that's any employer. But there are some high claimants that are on our plan. But I guess that's due to be expected, just with the amount of disease that's out there and how expensive some of those can be. So in addition, prescription drug costs is a huge driver. And there is a lot of name brand drugs that are in our formulary that don't have a generic equivalent yet. So they're life-saving drugs, and they're very important for our employees and their dependents to take, but they're very expensive as well. So hopefully the healthcare industry will stabilize over the next 2 years, and we'll see a positive renewal. But one thing that we're always currently looking at is the market of where the city's other insurance options are, but that we would need to negotiate that with our unions in order to change to a different plan. So it's a difficult road to navigate down. Also, I've been a part of insurance changes, and they're not seamless or easy, and there tends to be coverage issues, and it is a huge burden for our employees and their dependents to switch from our plan to like an Association of Washington Cities plan or another pool.
Thank you, Director Madelson.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I am very excited to see all the progress that you guys have made from 2021 and 2022 and the goals that continue to be a part of the HR department. I would love to see if we could include in one of our future study session presentations more on the results of the voluntary pay audit that was completed, because it sounds like that was successful. So it would be great to see if that's...
What are you asking, Councilmember Baldwin?
To the voluntary pay audit that Director Martinson spoke to, the results of that audit.
I believe that's related to the Equal Pay Act report.
Okay. Council, are you interested in seeing that report? I'm not sure I have a majority of the council members that are interested in it. The Director Martinson and I will chat about it and see what we can bring forward.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you. And then, in addition to that, I was going to ask on the decision package 0004.
What page are you on, Councilmember?
Page 107. It was noted in the description of the program that one of the elements was creating a formal internship program. And I was curious if the internships would be paid internships, because that's one of those areas where when we talk about having access and equity, there are a lot of young students or people coming from families that if you're self-supporting, you might not be able to participate in an internship if it's unpaid. And so I was curious if that's accounted for within the budget request.
Yes, so we've asked for $50,000 for a citywide internship program, so that would be paid. And in addition to that, we would be looking at, and we have looked at previously, the work study program, where some of that is offset by grant funds, but yes, it will be paid.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Should I jump to the next? Okay. I'm going to jump to page 107 since Councilmember Baldwin was asking questions about this budget ask. So this is our workforce development budget ask. And so as I was noting earlier, we have used some one-time budget amendment requests to be able to fund the citywide trading program. But we do not have those funds available in the human resources baseline budget. And there is a great need for us to develop curriculum in-house. So those would be on employee relations and differences, trainings for supervisors, and training for retention of staff, the de-escalation training that I was talking about. We would like to keep that as an ongoing annual training. And then there tends to be ongoing requests that come up throughout the year based on whatever our staff is experiencing at that time. So like, for example, we have management retreats where we brought in a speaker for generational differences. Previously, we've brought in a speaker that was funded and provided by the IT department for cybersecurity. So we try to bring up current events that are important to the management team, and so to have some funds to be able to do that. In addition to that, we realize that not everyone has the traditional path of education, and so we do have a tuition reimbursement program, but what we're finding is that there are some folks due to succession planning that want to move to other departments that would rather take a certificate type program. So we wanted to have some additional funds to be able to offer that as an opportunity if those departments don't have specific funding within their budget to be able to offer that from a succession planning standpoint. So I think that's a pretty much a high-level overview of that request.
Questions on that request? Okay.
And our last request is for process improvements of enhancing our NeoGov system that we've been using. So currently the modules that we have for that is our applicant tracking software. We also have an online hiring center that our hiring managers use to review candidates online with that redacted personal information. We've also implemented a learning management system, which was very important in COVID to be able to offer online training for staff. Also, our performance management system is through this system. And there will be a forthcoming request from another department for financial software that this system ties directly into some potential options for new software for our finance system. And what this will allow us to do is to automate a lot of processes that we have currently that we do manually. So this should be able to benefit every employee in the city of Auburn. For example, if someone needs to complete a request for a leave request and they need to take FMLA or paid family medical leave for the birth of a child. Right now that is, they go on the city's intranet, they print out a form, and they manually send it in. And we know that we can do better, but we need systems to be able to do better with that. In addition, if someone put in a request to me for that and I was on vacation, then it might sit in my inbox and not be timely, which is not good from a customer service standpoint, and sometimes urgent requests can't wait. So we could build a system that has backups in the case of an absence of a director or a supervisor. In addition, we have, like I said, 200 temps, seasonals, and volunteers, and right now a lot of them are having their manager input time in our timekeeping system, or they're doing paper timesheets, which in 2022 feels like we probably shouldn't be doing that. That's a high rate of error. So you'd be able to access on a smartphone or a tablet to be able to do their timesheet every day, which would alleviate a lot of burdens from both our HR teams and our payroll teams. And when I came to the city, we have what's called file maintenance. So whenever a new employee is hired, I'm sure as you all know, on your first day of work, you have the stack of paperwork that you need to complete and you need to turn in to select your benefits and notify of your beneficiaries and review policy and those types of things. So this system would automate all of that and be able to send that to payroll automatically versus what we're doing right now where we're printing out forms or printing to PDF, saving in a file for a payroll, and then they're having to enter into our system. So a way to be able to automate routine city processes.
Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. My only question is, and this is probably more for Director Thomas, on this particular request, we see no impact to the general fund, but to all other funds. So is that back to our internal?
So this is one of those one-time requests that we're expecting to rely on some of that one-time money that we talked about having at the end of 2022. So cumulative reserve fund money, excess fund balance.
I think perhaps then the one-time or ongoing might be miscoded.
It should be a one-time.
Okay.
Was it listed as ongoing somewhere?
Yeah, on the top of page 108, it showed as ongoing, and then all other funds. That's why I was curious.
Got it. Yes, it was misentered. It should be considered a one-time, but all other funds, just meaning it's a fund other than the general fund that's having an impact. It would be we would be using cumulative reserve fund money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. And we are going to take a 10-minute break. We will come back at 7:12. Please make sure you are back and ready to go because we've got a lot more riveting information to share with you tonight. Thank you. Yeah, we need to eat in the other room. saw that. All right. We will call the meeting back to order. We recording? All right. And council, before we move forward, we are going to, as I mentioned earlier, go to proclamations. And the first proclamation this evening is for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And joining us this evening is Alexis Douglas, Miss Auburn's outstanding teen. Hello. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, our proclamation, Mayor's proclamation for this evening. Whereas children are our greatest treasures and their health and well-being is a priority. Among the most distressing health concerns today is the high incidence of childhood cancer, which claims too many precious and promising young lives. And whereas childhood cancer spares no one, affecting kids from every background. Cancer kills more children than asthma, diabetes, cystic fibrosis, and pediatric AIDS combined. And it is estimated that 10,000 children are diagnosed with cancer every year. Although rare, pediatric cancer is the leading disease-related cause of death among children. And whereas the causes of childhood cancer are largely unknown, research has led to more successful forms of treatment and improvements in the quality of life for children coping with cancer and its side effects. A large number of long-term survivors now look forward to longer life expectancies, but unfortunately, many still face challenges or complications due to cancer. And whereas the toll that cancer takes on a child and family is unimaginable and usually causes delayed development in a young patient's life, education, and growth, while parents cope with the high costs, stress, and other difficulties associated with caring for their ill child and entire family, often having to travel or relocate to obtain appropriate treatment. And whereas throughout this month, we take the opportunity to thank many dedicated healthcare professionals, organizations, and parent advocacy groups that support childhood cancer patients and families by offering advice, encouragement, hope, and financial assistance, and that work tirelessly to lift the spirits of children suffering from cancer. And now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, Washington, do hereby proclaim September 2022 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Auburn and call upon our residents to raise awareness of pediatric cancer. We honor our children who have fought, those who currently in the fight, and those who were taken from us too soon. Dated this 19th day of September 2022. And Alexis, I know that you work tirelessly on behalf of childhood cancer, knowing that you are a survivor, one that I have known since you were first diagnosed. Do you have any comments that you would like to make this evening?
Yes. So I'll try not to take too much of your time, but first I just want to say thank you. As a cancer survivor, as someone who's watched many kids pass away from this disease, it is so important that these kids know that we have their backs. One of the main goals that I had coming in with the title of Miss Auburn's Outstanding Teen was to be able to bring awareness to the fact that not everyone knows about childhood cancer. Not everyone knows about how much it affects every kid's life that goes through it. And not everyone knows that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Throughout my year of service, I've worked tirelessly with Seattle Children's, Red Hawk-thon, and with the Auburn school districts to be able to find not only awareness, but to be able to make people aware of how common childhood cancer is and how many lives it affects. So I just want to say thank you for helping me in my fight to bring awareness, to show these kids that they don't have to fight alone, to show these kids that we're here with them and that they're going to have a life after cancer. Thank you.
All right, next is Hispanic Heritage Month. And if I could have Leticia Figueroa and her daughter Eliana, Nelda Trujillo and her daughter Adriana, and Mark Ziegler the principal from Gildo Ray Elementary. Welcome. It's good to see so many good friends. We are here to proclaim, under a mayor's proclamation, Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas the city of Auburn celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month and the opportunity to celebrate the lives, culture, and contributions of Hispanics in the United States whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas this month-long celebration recognizes the valuable contributions and special opportunity for public and private organizations, business, the arts, and education to focus on the many Hispanic Americans whose lives have shaped our common history and heritage. And whereas during Hispanic Heritage Month and throughout the year, it is imperative to embrace the diverse history so that all children can see themselves in our nation's past and know that they have a crucial role to play in shaping our future. Whereas the theme of this year's observance, Unidos, Inclusivity for a Stronger Nation, the theme encourages us to ensure that all voices are represented and welcomed to help build stronger communities and a stronger nation. And now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2022, as Hispanic Heritage Month in the City of Auburn, and urge residents to recognize the role that our Hispanic community has played in enhancing and contributing to the rich diversity within our community. Dated this 19th day of September 2022. Leticia, are you receiving the proclamation?
Yes, thank you.
And would you like to say a few words, if any of you have any words that you would like to share? Please.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody and Mayor Beckas for this beautiful proclamation. As some of you may know, there are 33 Latin American countries, so we are a melting pot and we get to celebrate the diversity of our cultures this month, and we are very just grateful for the opportunity and the blessing that it is to be able to be a part of this city. So thank you.
Nelda?
She said it beautifully. Muchísimas gracias. I just got to say thank you. Auburn, it's been a long time coming. So thank you so much for taking the time to recognizing your Latino heritage and how much of us live here, prosper here, and attend your businesses and your schools. Thank you so much. Gracias.
Mark?
As the principal of Gilda Ray Elementary, it's critically important to recognize the accomplishments and the gifts that each of these individuals bring to our community. Our children need more representation in this great culture, and we just embrace this night and thank you for recognizing the important accomplishments that this culture has, this community has brought to our city. Thank you.
Want to do a photo, or did you already get a photo of us? Okay. I gotta get hugs though before. Thank you so much. Good friends in our community. All right, and our final proclamation this evening is for Constitution Week, and our good friend Hilda Maryhugh is here. Hilda is with the Lakota NSDAR chapter that was founded in 1981 and located in Auburn. The Daughters of the American Revolution is a society that promotes historic preservation, patriotism, and education. Good evening, Hilda. Good evening. Mayor's Proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2022 marks the 234th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas in 1955, the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution petitioned Congress with a resolution. This week of observance for the foundation of the American form of government was signed into law by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on August 2nd, 1956, George W. Bush officially declared the inception of Constitution Week in 2002, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And whereas patriotic celebrations are held to commemorate and emphasize the responsibilities of citizens for protecting and defending the Constitution, now therefore I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as Constitution Week in the City of Auburn, and ask residents to study the Constitution and reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities which that privilege involves. Dated this 19th day of September 2022. Olga?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a few words you'd like to say?
I will. Thank you, Mayor Backus. The Constitution was drawn up 235 years ago. This document is still the oldest and the shortest constitution of any major documents in the world. It contains 4,440 written words. The Daughters of the American Revolution celebrates and lives this document not only during Constitution Week, but we promote, study, and educate the Constitution, which was adopted September 7th, 1789. So do you have a favorite amendment? So what the Constitution means to me is amendment number 1. It guarantees my freedom of speech. Mayor Backus and you ladies on the City Council can be so thankful that you have freedom of speech. If my father was alive, I would have asked him what freedom of speech was like on the Åland Islands, owned by Sweden. When he was a young man, the Åland Islands are between Sweden and Finland. World War I broke out. The Germans and the Russian soldiers were on the islands. My great uncle was forced to join the Russian army. Later, the islands were given to Finland. So I wonder, was his freedom of speech? I would think not. So, Lakota chapter in Auburn, the Daughters of the American Revolution, and I thank you for the proclamation.
Thank you, Hilda.
So, can I give these out to the...
I'll take them back up there. We're trying to limit COVID
Oh, okay.
exposure.
And I
So
have
I will do that. Piggly Wiggly.
I've had that for
Very
a long time.
oh.
I never find it.
Piggly Wiggly was my first job.
That's an old one.
Oh, are you giving this to me?
Yes, that's for
well,
you.
thank you very much. I'm a preferred club member.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Hilda,
You're
very
welcome.
much.
And thank you for passing that on.
Yes, thank you. I'll have it in my office if anybody needs it. Before we continue with the budget presentations, I see that a couple people came in right around 7 o'clock. Were any of you that came in wanting to speak during public comment this evening? Okay, public comment was, we started at 5 p.m. this evening, but I am going to go back and allow for public comment. Let me go back and read a portion. That we kind of thought that because you came right around 7 that you thought we were starting at 7 this evening. So we will move back, council, to public participation, public comment, excuse me. And I won't go through the entire thing again, but if you would like to speak, if you would please come forward to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and comments must be limited to 3 minutes, and there will be, you'll be able to see the clock count down at the city clerk's desk there. Who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Adrienne Battle. My address is 2715 V Court Southeast. I wanted to let all of you know about a new volunteer organization that has recently started based out of Auburn. We aim to help bridge some of the gaps in our human and animal services by fostering the pets of homeless people during emergencies. We are also available to domestic violence survivors and to other people who have literally no other option than to permanently surrender their pet because they're sick for a week. So I wanted to let you guys all know about that. Our services are always free and always fully confidential. We are working on getting our nonprofit status. That paperwork is moving through the state. And we also wanted to state our appreciation of the Auburn PD, Auburn Valley Humane Society, and especially Kent Hay. They have given us a huge amount of help in getting all of this off the ground. If there are any questions that anyone has, they can direct them to us at nomadpetfostering.org. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have engaged with Kent Hay already. Perfect. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joni Kavanaugh Brook. I read in the paper, 5501 Bridget Avenue Southeast, Auburn, Washington. I read in the paper that the city of Auburn is interested in supporting abortion, and I don't know to what extent they're supporting abortion. My mother should have aborted me because I was not supposed to have been born because my mother would have had damaged hip if I had been, I'd gone to term. But thank God she had the morals, I'm sorry to say, that not to abort me. You talked a few minutes ago about children having cancer and how we support our children, but we're not supporting the life of a child in aborting that child. And I don't encourage us to have to pay for abortion of other people's children. We were taught if you don't have sex, you're not going to get pregnant, except we understand rape. But the thing is, there's all kinds of ways not to get pregnant, and there's, like my father said, keep offer plan. I don't like the idea of a child being killed because someone doesn't want it, because there are so many people that do want children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right, we will close public comment for this evening, and we will move back to the presentations. Jamie?
All right, now that we're done with Director Martinson's presentation on human resources, you get to hear mine on finance. On page 31 is where the finance department's presentation begins, and that starts with our org chart. I'm not going to go through every single page. I'm going to summarize it. In our finance department, we are responsible for many different things. We have utility billing, financial planning, which is our budget, financial operations, which is payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, banking, debt and interest management, and then accounting and financial reporting, which is all of our our month-end and year-end financial reporting and audit, working with our auditors annually, and then our newly created tax division within the finance department. So for 2021, we had a couple of notable accomplishments in the utility billing department. I think kind of tying back to 2020 and 2021 and some of the things that were taking place was our ability to continue to serve our utility billing customers in spite of working remotely and finding a way to work remotely and in the office to help continue providing services to our utility billing customers. We also, in the utility billing, finally went live with our online utility billing portal, which gives customers live real-time access to their water consumption. So where this is really beneficial for water utility users in particular is that they can see when there's spikes in consumption and help identify leaks quicker. So if there's, and you can also see your trends and your history so you can alter behaviors. And this also helps really the citywide initiative and their focus and our focus on water conservation. Our other goals, we continue to really leverage our electronic records management system with Laserfish. That is an electronic records management system that the city clerk has, and we are trying to utilize that more and more. Rather than having boxes and boxes of financial records, we're trying to convert our records electronically. We've been doing this for the last couple of years. And in this process, we're also streamlining a lot of our systems. We're finding ways to be more efficient and really questioning why are we generating this piece of paper, and is there really a process that we've created that's inefficient? So just continuing to find efficiencies in our financial processes. And then finally, really the implementation of the B&O tax. That's been a pretty big lift in our finance department and just building our back-end systems as well as our front-end systems for businesses, and then the business outreach and response to all the businesses that have called or emailed with questions, and trying to be proactive and getting communication out. We know that it's not a popular initiative, but trying to make sure that businesses have been informed timely and with good information to help ease the transition as best that we can from a customer service standpoint. Looking forward, our goals for 23-24 is really just a big focus is continuing our focus on process improvement. We are a very process-oriented type of department. We have a set amount of items that we have to get produced, lots of timelines, and making sure that we can, to the extent that we can reduce our timelines, but to increase efficiency, but also accuracy, and enhance our focus on reducing errors and limiting errors. So budget highlights for the year. Our baseline budget that we're requesting to change is $508,000 over 2022, an additional $61,000 over 2024. When I say baseline budget, this is just our increased contributions to our internal service funds and our salaries and benefits. So we're not asking for anything new in baseline budget. The reason that 2023 figure seems so large, it actually has to do with one internal service fund in particularly, and that is the multimedia fund. In 2020, so our 2023 and 2024 budget for our internal service funds are based on historical usage. And in 2022, we relied very heavily on our multimedia department to help us with that B&O outreach campaign that I was talking about. So not only with the communications out to businesses, but also helping us create all of our fillable PDF forms and also updating our website as well. So we've been a heavy user of the multimedia department. They've been fantastic, but that one time or that 1 year's worth of experience is really driving up our costs. Other general fund departments' costs got to go down because we are using them more relatively than any other department right now. So for our newer requests, we actually have two new requests. One is an ongoing request. One of them is a one-time request. Coming back to the B&O program again, we're requesting one desk auditor to add in 2023, and then an additional field compliance auditor in 2024. Right now, we have a B&O program coordinator, and she is the one managing all of the systems front end and back end setup, as well as managing the 50 to 60 tax returns that we receive each quarter. We're expecting an onslaught, probably about 3,000 tax returns once we get into 2023, between quarterly and annual tax returns that we'll be receiving. And one of the things that we want to make sure that this program is successful and making sure that everybody is compliant as soon as possible is having somebody that's actually reviewing all of those tax returns that we're receiving and making sure, double checking for accuracy and completeness, and then following back up with businesses if there's something that just doesn't seem to make sense. That's one important reason why we're asking for that desk auditor, but I think the second, probably more important purpose that this person would fill is really being that customer service contact with businesses. We expect to have a lot of questions from all of the other businesses other than the 50 to 60 that are currently filing. So all of the other businesses that have business in Auburn, we expect phone calls, emails, and we want to make sure that we're responding as timely as possible with reliable information. The position that we're asking for in 2024 is to take that one step further, which is to start beginning some compliance audits, going out and finding businesses that aren't compliant with reporting, and then maybe even starting some field audits. I'm more than confident that the cost of this program will be able to generate the revenue in just accurate B&O tax reporting with having these positions available. So I'm requesting to add these to the program and then increase our estimated revenue by the same amount, which is minimal. I expect we will actually, over time, we would collect even more than this, as long as we have 2 qualified people in that position working with businesses and ensuring compliance. The second new request, it's a one-time request. This would be relying on those cumulative reserve funds, the ending fund balance, the excess ending fund balance that we expect to end 2022 with, and that's to replace our financial system. That's our general ledger system. We've been using Eden for 21 years. That was the last time that we converted financial softwares. There's really a couple of reasons that are really necessitating this. The one most important one is the vendor is no longer supporting our financial system beyond to 2025, and we need to start working towards an RFP process and a selection process, process review process, and then an implementation of a new software before our current system becomes completely unsupported by the vendor. But really, the product that we're using is 21 years old, and so much has changed technology-wise in the last 21 years. Our financial system is expected to connect to all of our point-of-sale systems throughout the city. So that's the golf course, that's our utility billing system, that's any of our cash receipting systems, as well as our permitting system, our HRIS system that Director Martinson had been mentioning earlier. We need a more technology savvy system that works with technology in a way that doesn't require really manual processes, which is what we're currently doing in order to make our general ledger work with all of our other ancillary accounting systems. There's, of course, all sorts of other layers to that as well, which is we're really limited. Our processes, we talk about wanting to have goals of process improvement, and we're limited to improve our processes by the constraints of the system. So it's not user-friendly. We have to use very prescribed processes a lot of times based on this software that is now 20 to 30 years old at this point. So that is the reason we're asking. We expect that this is probably going to take 3 to 4 years, maybe even a little bit longer, from the very beginning of identifying our needs, between our needs assessment and the actual implementation. So it's one of those things we need to start thinking about now rather than before it's too late. Are there
questions, Council? Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor. As you were putting numbers together for your replacement ERP system, are you also including post-go live support or transition in your planning for that?
So for that, no, that's not included. The ongoing costs are not included. And primarily, one, we don't know how much they're going to be, and two, we don't expect those costs to really come into play until the next biennium.
Okay.
So what we're asking is to be able to move forward with just the vendor selection process in this first 2 years. Implementation probably wouldn't even be complete until we're into the next biennium, and at which point, hopefully, we would have a better idea of what those ongoing maintenance and support costs would be at that time.
Okay, but the 2.6 mil includes part of the implementation, not just RFP.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Well, in 2023, you've got the 150,000, which
Yeah.
for an RFP, that makes sense. And then you said multiple years for the implementation, so the 2.6 million, I'm assuming, would be spread out not only for year one of the implementation, but potentially other years as well.
Correct. So even though we expect that to go beyond the biennium, we're asking for the budget for that one-time cost. Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
There's also embedded, not only is the 150,000 in 2023, but another 150,000 for the second year, just to help us with our process mapping as well. I'm hoping between the two that it'll be enough money, the 2.5 million and the 150,000, that will be enough to cover all of it. But I've been working with Director Travis and IT, and we're going to need a lot of support. We've got a lot of different processes, and there'll be a lot of process mapping to go through.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Trout Manuel?
Thank you. I see that you're asking to fill a position in 2023 and then again on 2024.
Correct.
How many full-time employees do we have already? Are these just strictly going to be working on the B&O program?
Correct.
Page 31 has the.
Pardon me?
Page 31 has the org chart that will show you how many employees.
Page 31. Okay.
So page 31 is the org chart for the finance department. We currently have that tax and licensing auditor. That is the current position that we currently have filled. She's been helping build out the whole program. We're asking for those two positions underneath that position, which would be the desk auditor and the field compliance auditor.
Oh, okay.
So it would be 3 people dedicated to the program, and that's everything between the code, making sure that the code is updated, making sure that our systems are working. We have front-end systems as well as a system of record in the back end, and handling those 3,000 plus tax returns every year, and then doing audits as well, which is a completely separate function from actually receiving and processing those payments.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Other questions, council? Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you. On the piece for the staffing for the B&O resources, I assume that's comparable to what we see in the news when they talk about putting funding towards the IRS to make sure that actual recovery can be had for taxes, right?
Yes.
Basically, it supports returns back into the coffers.
Just to clarify, we don't have as much authority as the IRS, but
I don't think we will, and nobody wants that. Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? All right. Thank you, Jamie.
Okay. And I'm going to hit a couple of other funds within the general fund that the finance department oversees. If you go to page 37, we have the non-departmental department. Means nobody else wants to claim it, so we get it. But there's a lot of really important activity. It's all of the activity that doesn't really fit into a typical department. So we have our planned retirement cash outs. So when somebody retires and they cash out all of their vacation or unused sick leave, if they qualify for a sick leave cash out, we actually try to budget for that ahead of time as we know about those planned retirements. So this is the department within the general fund where we budget and plan for those retirements. We also have police and fire retiree costs. So those are our LEF retiree medical and pension costs are also out of the non-departmental fund. all of our AVHS, so the Humane Society and our pet licensing costs. We contract with them to provide animal services, animal housing services in the city. And then we also actually budget for, I was talking about debt service earlier. We have golf and cemetery debt service, and we budget for the payment of that out of the non-departmental fund. And then we have some contingency funds in there as well for unexpected events. I don't know. I'm going to switch microphones. And if this one squeaks, then I'm going to take it personally. So highlights for the non-departmental department is there is no baseline changes between over 2022. There are some increases, and these are all related to the requests that you're hearing from all of the departments. So there are elements of the requests that department heads are bringing to you, and a portion of those costs, the way our accounting works out, get paid for out of this non-departmental fund. So if there's any request that that doesn't move forward, then the cost in their department would go down, as well as the cost of it in the non-departmental fund as well. When the department directors are presenting their budget requests, they are presenting the entire cost of the program, though. So it's not like this is a missing piece that we haven't accounted for. They are accounting for the entire cost in their presentations. Just like I said, the accounting piece of it makes it pop up here in this fund. One other fund is the ARPA fund. This is on page 21. This is more of a housekeeping item. The council has already seen this list of projects. We have not fully budgeted all of those projects that the council has asked for the departments to move forward with. So this is us just making sure that all of those projects previously approved by the council actually get in the budget. So of the $14.3 million that we've received, we are almost 7.2 of that has not yet been budgeted. And so this is getting the remaining $7.2 million budgeted into 23 and 24, so we can have it obligated and or spent by the end of December 2024, which is our period of availability on those funds. Were there any questions about ARPA?
Questions, council? Okay. So this, I think, is a pretty important slide. This is on page 23. This is the cumulative reserve fund, our savings account. I had mentioned before we considered our existing reserve fund policy and how we could look at enhancing it, making it a little bit stronger before considering new program requests, and this is our proposal. So the chart at the top, which is blue, that is our cumulative reserve funding policy as it's written right now. So our policy states that we will strive to have a minimum of a 5% up to a 10% cumulative reserve fund balance to cover to cover 1 year's worth of debt service, and a combination between having money set aside for an economic stabilization fund, which is transferring money from the cumulative reserve fund into the general fund to bridge the revenue and expenditure gap, and having money set aside for catastrophic or unplanned events. The green section is what we are proposing that we revise that policy to. So bumping it from 5 to 10% to a 10 to 36% policy. And you can see on both sides of the column where we're proposing to how we would allocate that money within the cumulative reserve fund. So anywhere between, 1 year's worth of debt service, no matter what, and then anywhere between $4.4 million and $19.8 million for the economic stabilization funding, anywhere between $0 and $9.9 million for one-time capital programs,
and then anywhere between 4.4 million and 4.9 million for catastrophic events. So if that's the policy that we move forward with, the proposed budget on the bottom is how we would propose to meet or have our 23-24 budget fit that revised policy. So we would, by the beginning of 2023, it would be funded at 31%. And if the council approves to move forward all of the new one-time programs, if they approve this policy and the one-time funded programs, we would have $16 million left in the cumulative reserve fund at the end of 2024. So there's a lot going on with that. Are there any questions about that piece? Yeah.
So if you could perhaps talk to potential uses for the economic conditions and stabilization. I think I know what it means, but just to have you clarify.
Yes, of course. So that is, that would be the money that we'd have set aside in the cumulative reserve fund available to transfer into the general fund to help balance the budget. So if we expect expenditures to exceed revenues and we're not meeting our minimum 8% fund balance in the general fund, then that money would be available to transfer into the general fund. And we are saying that if we're going to do a large transfer in 2022, that we would need to have some of that money available in 2024 to transfer into the general fund.
Okay. And so those circumstances would be aligned to what you were saying in the case of economic downturn, reduced revenue coming from, lower sales, if there's recession, some of the assumptions and forecasting you had spoken to earlier.
Correct. Okay. So it would be specific to how do we make the general fund whole to maintain the same levels of service if we don't have the revenue coming in to support those services. Okay. Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions, Council? Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just going to ask you about the catastrophic events. Would that cover COVID or a pandemic?
It could be anything. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that we write a policy so prescriptive that it would spell out only the events in which we could use it for. Of course, council could always change it and make it how they would want it to be used. But catastrophic events, just anything unplanned and large in magnitude, anything that maybe our liability insurance wouldn't cover that we needed money for.
Oh, I mean, we have a catastrophic events fund right now, right?
We have insurance. We're insured that covers most catastrophic events. That would be our risk management manager. Yeah. So most catastrophic things would be covered, but there's also if we're talking a FEMA sort of event, and sometimes it's having access to that cash right away. This at least has cash available to us to use, whether or not we get reimbursed for it later or not.
The catastrophic event debit card.
Yes.
Don't leave home without it.
Well, where is that?
It's like the Piggly Wiggly's card.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, Council? All right.
All right, thank you. And now I'm going to ask Director Como. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, Kendra Como, City Attorney. And I will present my budget, which begins on page 39 technically. And then the accomplishments are on page 42. Just a brief overview, the legal department consists of the prosecution division, the city clerk's division, our civil division and administration, and real estate. We pride ourselves in being a full-service in-house legal department of 21 committed staff members charged with advising the city in all legal matters pertaining to the business of the city, and representing the city in all civil and criminal litigation, providing timely access to public records, and managing the city's real estate assets. As I mentioned, the civil division, probably one of the more frequently interfaced division along with the city clerks for council. The civil division does handle all lawsuits on behalf of the city. We conduct contract review, we approve all ordinances as to form, and we act as the council parliamentarian. The goal of this civil division is to provide pragmatic, impartial, and timely legal advice to the city. In our city clerks division, we have Sean Campbell as our city clerk, who attends many open public meetings. We also have 2 deputy city clerks, one for city records and one for our police department records. The goal of the city clerks division is to increase the ease of the public to access city government in an open and transparent way. And whether that's from public records to open public meetings, that's what we endeavor to do. In my department, we also have Josh Arndt, our real estate manager, who is responsible for negotiating real property purchases. We also execute easements, we manage leases and negotiate them, and we currently support the city's capital facility master plan implementation, along with support with many other departments. On the prosecution side, we have a lead prosecutor who manages our legal assistance in the criminal division. That lead prosecutor takes a more active role in interacting with our court and the public defender's office as well. And then we have a domestic violence paralegal and 4 other prosecutors. In 2021, I will note our accomplishments, which again are on page 42. One of our accomplishments is to incorporate digital contract signatures and contract management to increase our ability to locate records efficiently and be more transparent with our records for both city staff and the public. And as part of the mayor's initiative, we began the Auburn Community Court in May of 2021 with the assistance and support of many other departments. Kent Hay is out there each week along with 2 police officers, and Ingrid has her team operating work crew, and all of us are working together to support the process. We've had 37 total participants and 10 total graduates, and we have committed to doing an annual report to the City Council. And as Jamie mentioned in her department, while it might be a small but important accomplishment, we've also gone paperless as an office. And so when you consider our, on average, 5,000 filings a year, it does make a small but hopefully important difference. Our goals in 23 and 24 are to continue the operation and potentially expand the Auburn Community Court, focusing on accountability and a philosophy that centers the defendant with the victims and the community. We are also working with prosecution and our public defender's office to coordinate with the SCORE jail to enable defendants and case managers access to treatment modalities. We are continuing to support the mayor and all city staff to enhance the ability of Auburn to carry out our collective municipal responsibilities as well. And with that, do you want to do the budget highlights first? In order? I can, do you want me to talk about that? So one of the items on this slide is a budget highlight, and it is under the department, there is a division that has sort of a collection of different uses, and the mayor's office is overseeing part of that, so I might turn it over to Mayor Backus to speak to some of those ARPA-related funding pieces. I think I can talk to those. I think just at a high level, as Director Como had said, we have a lot of the budgeting for the homelessness outreach, the ACRC project. it's overseen in the mayor's office, but to keep those costs all consolidated into one location, because a lot of it is so closely related to the real estate management side of things, we do have that entire budget accounted for in the city attorney's budget. So part of the city attorney's budget includes some ARPA funding, which is those housing vouchers for $875,000, both in 2023 and 2024, and that is a program that Kent Hay will be overseeing and managing. And then turning to our new request, which you will find on page 111 and 112 of Book 1. There are two new requests. The first one has to do with real estate. The city owns 6 improved surface and structured parking lots, 2 residential properties, and hundreds of acres of non-utility, non-park vacant property, which includes critical and sensitive areas, and leasehold interest in 23,000 square feet of commercial space being used as the ACRC. So the additional funding request on page 111, this amount will allow us to do sufficient repairs, maintenance, and non-capitalized improvements, and having better maintained assets will reduce the city's risk and liability exposure, provide for a safer and more pleasant community experience in many ways, and promote activation, use, and economic development. On page 112, you'll find our second request, which is related to the King County inquest process. In 2018, Dow Constantine and the King County Executive's Office made some changes to the King County inquest process, and in 2021, those became active. Those changes, in summary, are triggered first when a death occurs in the course of an officer conducting their law enforcement duties, and the King County Prosecutor's Office receives materials from the investigating independent agency members, reviews those materials, and then makes a recommendation as to whether or not an inquest should be held. If ordered, an inquest administrator is assigned and the case is set for an inquest trial. Based on the recent changes to the inquest process, as I mentioned, the city now requires new resources to engage in discovery in the pretrial process in the amount of $50,000 each year. And this funding will assist my preparation of these cases in an efficient and professional manner. And with that, that summarizes the request from my office.
Questions, council? Deputy Mayor Jayaraj.
Thank you, Aaron. City Attorney Kendra Como, thank you very much. My question is with the King County process, is $50,000 going to be enough every year?
I did consider the requests and the demands, and I do feel that $50,000 is enough.
Okay.
Thank you for the
That
question.
was my simple question. Thank you.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say congratulations on the community court and to the 10 graduates. That's absolutely amazing and really wonderful for our city. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the decision package for the inquests, what does the $50,000 cover? Does that cover your time or a resource being hired? What is it exactly that comes with that?
The funding would go to the discovery, so the pretrial process, which might include things like depositions, court reporters, deposition transcripts, and maybe experts if that's necessary.
So services?
Correct. Professional services and sort of the support needed for that pretrial process.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, council? All right. Councilmember Baldwin.
One more. In line with the question from Deputy Mayor, as well as Councilmember Stearns, with the success that you have had in community courts, I was a little surprised not to see additional budget maybe for expanding that area. What do you think your trajectory looks like without having additional funding in that area?
So any funding we would potentially need in community court would be related to employees. And right now, my staff is able to cover the calendar, and we have not been in discussions, informal discussions about expanding it. The court contract is managed by the Human Resources Department and not my department. So the additional calendars and things would occur in a different department. But we are looking at how can we expand it in ways that may not look like a traditional calendar as well. So how can we be most effective with those participants enrolled?
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can I just actually follow up on that? So does the King County contract, does that provide funding to us for the court?
I would defer the question to Director Martinson. We pay for our contract with the King County District Court, but
Okay.
beside that, if you had additional questions, I would defer to
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is if we are getting money from King County and the money goes away, at that point, would we ask for an increase?
Director Martinson, would you like to answer?
So to answer your question, there's judge and clerk time that is covered by King County District Court. And so the additional costs above and beyond that for public defense or any staff time or resources for the resource center is not covered by the court.
Oh, okay, thank you. So the county contract pays for the judge, is what you're saying?
Judge and the clerk.
Okay, and if the contract ended, we would presumably be asked to come up with more money to pay for the judge?
Correct, and that'll
Okay.
be considered under the municipal court study that'll be forthcoming to
All right, thank you so much. I was confused, and I really appreciate your answer.
Other questions? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Yes, I don't know if you mentioned it. How often is the court reside?
We have court every day, all day, but the community court is Thursday afternoon.
Okay. Could I
Any
do
other
a follow-up?
questions? Go ahead.
Do we only have one judge?
We have two judges that we pay for under the contract with King County District Court. So we have two courtrooms that operate in our Justice Center every day. And then one of those judges moves over to the community court on Thursday afternoons.
And King County pays for those two judges?
Well, we pay for them under the contract that we
Contract,
have
under the
with King
contract.
County
Okay.
Court System.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
And Mayor, I think we just had one more department to cover on our agenda tonight. So if
no pressure.
Director Tate.
No pressure.
I'm batting ninth.
You're batting cleanup tonight.
Good evening. For the record, Jeff Tate, Director of Community Development. And tonight's presentation from Community Development will start with, first of all, just mentioning that our budget is located in both of the budget documents. So we manage funds, of course, from the general fund, but also the hotel motel tax. We manage that. Housing and Community Development Funds, which is the Community Development Block Grant, federal funding that we receive. Business Improvement Funds, formerly called the Business Improvement Area Rate. And then funds that are managed as part of SKIP, the South King Housing and Homelessness Partner Collaboration. So rather than bounce back and forth from one book to another, I just want to cover a few of our 2021-2022 accomplishments as a whole, and then talk a little bit about our 2023-2024 goals as a whole as well. So first of all, on the accomplishment side, things that were really significant in the last couple of years. First, we were able to enter into the eCity Government Alliance, which is mybuildingpermit.com, which is the common portal that about 20 different cities are using to allow customers to submit their building permit applications online and track progress of what's happening through the process, which has been a really rewarding experience, and customers have really provided a lot of positive feedback on that. And that was a big sort of process change for us that we wrapped up in the last couple of years. Most recently, as of Thursday last week, we transitioned our business licensing process and portal over to the State Department of Revenue. This was a state law requirement. I came before City Council a few weeks ago to make some or present some code changes. So yeah, we just completed that transition, and we've been working on that for a little over a year, so that's been a big accomplishment as well. We adopted, well, Council adopted, but we brought forth modernized airport standards that were in compliance with the city's airport master plan. So that was significant. There was the creation of the Housing Action Plan, and City Council took action on that as well, which will formulate and guide some of our actions and goals in 23 and 24 as well. We entered into a contract with the Auburn Area Chamber for tourism services. So they're spending this year working on a tourism plan for 23 and 24, so we're going to be excited to be able to talk more about that later in this year, but entering into that contract was a significant step forward. We, through the federal funding, through CDBG, we funded 7 sidewalk improvements where ramps at an intersection, all the ramps at an intersection are upgraded for ADA compliance. We funded more than 100 repairs to income-qualified folks under our Housing Home Repair Program, which restored heat and water, basic services for folks to keep them in their home. We brought forward an ordinance to City Council earlier in this year to eliminate the business improvement area rate in favor of dedicating a portion of the city's business and occupation tax to fund the BIA board strategies and actions that they seek out. So a different way of funding that group. Creation of a portable sign matching grant program where businesses can get, if they're providing or creating higher quality portable signs like A-frames, that the city and the BIA can help fund those higher quality signs. And then on SKIP, which is kind of an interesting organization, it's housed under community development, but as council knows, SKIP is a collaborative amongst 10 different cities plus King County. But it's important to note, since that's in the city of Auburn's budget, and we manage it as the administering agency, it's important to note that SKIP created an advisory board in the last couple of years, which is in place to amplify and ensure community voices are informing affordable housing funding investments and guiding policy decision. SKIP entered into an interlocal with 8 of the SKIP cities, including Auburn, for pooling of HB 1406 funds, which will be used for delivering affordable housing in the future. And SKIP also received Washington State nonprofit status for a SKIP Foundation so that it's in a better position to raise money approaching philanthropic organizations, which can help seed more capital investment in the community. So those are significant accomplishments through the course of the last couple of years. Things that we're looking forward to in our 23-24 budget include implementing the actions of the Housing Action Plan, updating our comprehensive plan in compliance with state law by December 31st of 2024, creation of a new downtown urban center plan, since our current plan is about 21 years old, and providing a new renewed tourism focus, as I mentioned, through that contract with the Auburn Area Chamber. We will be working on completion of an updated to the Human Service Needs Assessment, which is important for us to maintain our CDBG funding allocation. We've made a number of program efficiency improvements in the home repair program, so we think we can increase the number of homes that we're improving by about 10% for 23 and 24 over 21 and 22. We are in the BIA area looking to replace banners, hopefully install new bike racks, wrap garbage cans with decorative skins or repaint them, do a number of improvements, working with the Downtown Auburn Cooperative as well to help deliver on those improvements, helping fund downtown security and some additional support from our Trillium folks who help get out in the downtown area and help clean it. And then on the SCIP side, establishing the SCIP Capital Fund, which is really critical for acquiring or investing in affordable housing in our community. And then SCIP also providing technical assistance to all the South King County cities in their housing element updates, which is part of their comprehensive plan. So a lot of good work done, a lot of much needed work to do in front of us. And I think just from kind of zooming in on the budget part of this, we've submitted one decision package. It's one-time money for 2023. It's a $50,000 request. I'd put this in the category of something that is routine, not because it's easy, but because every 5 years we are required to do a needs assessment within our community in order to maintain our $600,000 to $650,000 per year entitlement from Housing and Urban Development, the federal funds that we receive under the CDBG program. So the way I would characterize it is it's a $50,000 investment that gives us about $3.25 million back over a 5-year period of time. So we're looking to do that in 2023. That is the one decision package that we've submitted. Happy to answer questions on that. And then in terms of our budget itself, of course, you know, Jamie's talked a little bit about, and other department heads have talked a little bit about the costs that we incur as a result of salaries and benefits. Outside of that, I would just call out a couple of other areas, and it's really related back to the slide that Jamie showed a little bit ago about ARPA requests. So a lot of that ARPA funds, it looks like the budget increases, but those increases are due to the fact that ARPA funds are being planted in the department to deliver on the items that City Council had previously approved on. So I would characterize those a little differently than some other types of increases in budget because those items will not be reflected in budgets beyond that. Happy to answer questions.
Questions, Council? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good report there, Director Tate. I was curious. I've seen in a couple instances here where it's been emphasized that Auburn plays a big role in the SCIP housing program. I'm curious, does Auburn receive administrative costs from the other participating cities?
We sure do.
To perform that function? We
sure do. Those administrative costs, if our memory serves me correctly, are about 15% that we receive so that we can do all the things that we need to do to provide space, IT support, finance support. They collect a City of Auburn paycheck, so they go through payroll with us. They get a limited amount of legal support here and there. But yeah, there's a lot of administrative support, especially when setting it up. Now they're kind of operating in a really kind of well-oiled machine, and a lot of the setup items are now routine. So I'll say it was kind of a heavy lift in the beginning, but things are working out really well, and we do get compensated.
Sounds like you're a little more comfortable with that amount of support that is required and being able to pay for it.
Yeah, I feel we're in a good place right now.
Good. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Jay Rosh.
Thank you, Your Honor. Director Tate, thank you very much for your presentation. How about the homelessness issue? I know you've got Kent and another gentleman working in that department. Do we have enough funds for them to keep going for the next few years at least?
I think there's two parts to answering that question. One that I can answer, and then one that I think Director of Administration is probably better suited to answer some parts that directly relate to Kent and the work that his partner Matt does as well. In community development, the Community Services Division, you often see and hear from Joy Scott. Her team administers the Human Services funding line item in our budget. So that is an important distinction, because the work that community development does is really about putting out a grant application process every 2 years and entering into contracts with about 50 different nonprofit agencies, many of whom are focused on homelessness prevention, and support around those experiencing homelessness or those trying to avoid homelessness. So of the $600,000 in that line item, approximately 70% of that goes towards that collection of services. So maybe the way to say it is that Joy and her team are more on the contract administration side, and then every quarter we're receiving reports from those agencies telling us how many kind of units they serve. Units is kind of a generic term, because that's all defined a little bit differently based upon what the service is. So the $600,000 line item that we have, which is really supplemented by some ARPA funds that we're going to be able to get closer to about $1 million a year in 23 and 24. So we're really excited about having an additional funding resource to tap into. But they're not the folks that are out in the field like Kent and Matt. So if your question is really about, do Kent and Matt have the resources they need?
Right.
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, because I don't supervise those programs. But I can also say this, that the budget that's being presented by the collection of department heads included a conversation about what everybody's needs were. So while I can't speak to those specifically, it was a robust conversation about where the needs lie. And I don't know if there's, Mayor, I don't know if your mic is live because you want more to add to that, or?
Well, so Kent and Matt report to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we are constantly talking about what the funds are that are necessary, and we do believe that we have the funding that we need right now, including the grant funds that we received, the ARPA funds, and we continue to look at ways to partner with other government agencies and nonprofits to ensure that the budget does work.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Director Tate.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Director Tate, my question, I think, falls in a similar space in that I do recognize that Kent and team are under the mayor, but with the human services grants that we do have, to what extent do we have programs in that space around addiction? Because it seems like in the conversations I've had since joining council, that you can't have a conversation about homelessness in Auburn without also having a conversation about addiction. But I don't see positions reflected in the current budget that speak to the need to have maybe specialists that deal with addiction, that support Kent and team, that support the housing. So is that something through the human services grants we see coming up, or where does that live, I guess?
Sure, it's a great question. So we do fund addiction services. We do have contracts in place, and well, it's hard for me to tell you in this moment who the 4 or 5 agencies are that we fund in that area. We have access to those resources, and it's not just Human Services, that team that has access to those resources, Kent and Matt have access to those resources as well. There are agencies that we can tap into when there is a need in the field, in the community, whether it's now or whether it's a little bit longer term, to enlist that help. So it's there. It's interesting because what I mentioned before about that human needs assessment, that's exactly the study that defines how we're going to make, as a city, investments into human services. So when we did that last time, it identified 5 categories. It said that within those 5 categories, X% of the city's human services budget should be allocated into each one of those categories. And addiction services is squarely planted in those categories, because you're absolutely right that you can't have a conversation about homelessness without having that kind of infrastructure in place. So it's there. We'll be revisiting it again. We'll be coming back to City Council again to talk about the outcomes of that human services needs assessment, so that we're not always, well, I guess rather than be negative, be positive. We're pivoting when we need to pivot every 5 years into where we should be making investments in the community with that funding source.
Right. And I bring that up, I think, because we had just heard from our King County Regional Housing Director, who had came and spoke to us, was it earlier this summer? And that was one of the things that really stood out in that presentation, is that as we're moving to getting people out of homelessness, the support that they sometimes need is not always a voucher, but help with those addiction issues. So.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I think that's an opportunity area for all of us. As that organization forms, it's going to need to understand within each community what resources to access for people that are in need of help. And that is something that's still forming, because each of the cities has, Auburn's not unique. We're all making investments like this in human services, but having a regional network know how to access that as well is something that's still building out.
Okay.
And please remember, too, that you did approve tonight for us joining into the opioid addiction class action lawsuit, which could provide, right now the estimate is $834,000 to the city of Auburn to be used in addiction-type programs. So we don't yet know what's coming. But other questions? Councilmember Stearns?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm excited about the new downtown housing plan. You said it was 21 years old, just like your program. So that's great to hear. And then also it's really good to hear, just want to thank you for finding more efficiency and getting that extra 10% in the housing, making home repairs. That's really important to people. So really grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you. And something that's super rewarding to staff, and it's always fun when you're in that space because they're motivated to do more. That's fun.
Questions? Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes, just one last item, which I believe ties to the first page, on page 47, where we were talking about making sure that we've got good access and availability to healthier food options out there in the community, and that had been somewhat stalled, I think, in the course of handling the pandemic. One thing I've noted is within the Auburn Food Bank that their hours, when we talk about access to places, are limited for after business hours and limited on the weekends. And I know that there are a number of families and individuals that experience food scarcity issues, and to be able to have better access would be making sure that we've got a good balance of hours in that space. So to whatever extent we can help influence that, I would look for that opportunity.
Thanks for that feedback.
Yep.
Other questions or comments, council? Okay. Is that it, Jeff?
That's it.
All right. Jamie. Thank you, Jeff.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor,
I don't know if it's on. There.
It wasn't on. Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. We actually were able to get through the entire agenda, all the items that I was hoping we could get covered today in our first workshop. So that should set up really well for tomorrow night's meeting and then next Tuesday's meeting. I don't think that there were any follow-up questions that we weren't able to answer tonight to take into tomorrow night's meeting. But tomorrow we will finish up our general fund department review. We'll wrap up with the police department, the public works department, and the parks Art and recreation department. And then we'll go over our general governmental capital plans. And with that, were there any outstanding questions that I did miss that I am supposed to be following up on for tomorrow?
Any questions?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you to all of the directors that did presentations this evening and those who sat through those presentations, and will be on the hook tomorrow night for additional information as we go through the biennial budget. Council, I mentioned earlier that I might encourage that we forego the mayor and council member reports tonight. Are there any objections from any of you? As I hold up this gavel, are there any objections from any of you? We have no reason for an executive or closed session this evening, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Recording
No, I'm
stopped.
just